The faint black aura swam all over Chanyi's body. Soon, every inch of her body was enveloped by a dark and blurry profound light. The light only lasted for a short time. So short, in fact, that it disappeared just as the witches were about to probe it. At the same time, Chi withdrew his palm and stopped whatever he was doing. Chanyi opened her eyes and checked her profound veins immediately. However, she frowned when she found no changes in herself whatsoever. It was the same with the rest of the witches. Yili spoke up first and asked, "How do you feel?" Chanyi slowly shook her head in response. Although they never believed that Chi could do what he claimed he could do in the first place, the confirmation was the last straw that broke the camel's back. If the witches weren't livid before, they were now after being provoked and made fun of repeatedly. In contrast, Chi was acting distant and indifferent, much as he had since the beginning. It was as if the world itself was of no concern to him. Kai Yinger's lips had curled into an exquisite but derisive smile, clearly mocking them for their foolish choice to believe them in the witch's opinion. Very good. Yili's tone actually grew tamer as she approached the limit of her anger. In the end, outsiders are just outsiders. Yesterday you killed Yan Sanjiang, and today you provoked us repeatedly in the soul-stealing realm. It would seem that you're— Wait! Chanyi's sudden exclamation of surprise drew the witch's attention immediately. They quickly discovered that the normally collected witch was looking unusually stunned and lost. In fact, her shock and disbelief seemed to be growing by the second. It was as if she was seeing an unbelievable dream that only she could perceive. "What is it?" Yao Dai asked. Chanyi didn't say anything. She simply raised her arm very, very slowly and spread open her palm. The confused witches watched as a ball of darkness suddenly appeared in Chanyi's hand. It took only an instant to transform into a big, black lotus. The dark lotus carried the aura of a dark purgatory. It soundlessly devoured all the light in its surroundings and dyed every witch's eyes black, eyes that were filled with pure shock and disbelief. Eighth Witch Yu Wu opened her mouth unconsciously. Her eyes were about as widened as they could be. How did you do it, Chanyi?" Chanyi was the ninth witch and overall the weakest of all of them. Her power couldn't easily affect or suppress her fellow sisters, and thus far the black lotus she created hadn't exceeded their knowledge of her limits. However, the same couldn't be said about the speed at which the black lotus had been created. It was so fast it should have been absolutely impossible. Chanyi had created her black lotus out of nothing in barely an instant, and it was more than twice her usual speed. Even stranger was how quiet, or more accurately, docile, the black lotus in Chanyi's hand was. Darkness profound energy was a symbol of negativity, violence, and destruction. And every time it was used, it was like unleashing a violent and berserk devil god that wants to devour everything in the world. This didn't change even when the profound practitioners controlling it had reached the divine master realm, the supposedly highest realm in this world. Darkness profound energy had never had anything to do with the word tame. It was the common sense of common senses in today's northern divine region and world. But Chanyi's darkness profound energy was so stable that it defied common sense. It was almost as if it was a sentient being that had submitted entirely to her will. In other words, Chanyi had perfect control over her darkness profound energy. "Chanyi, what's going on?" Yili stuttered, but the witch in question still didn't give her an answer. Since it was her body that was transformed, her shock was many times greater than her sister's. Chanyi closed her palm tentatively, and the lotus of darkness vanished completely without a trace. Again, her action caused her sisters to shiver in shock. Not even the strongest witch of them all, no, the god-emperors of the northern divine region, could withdraw their darkness profound energy immediately and leave no traces behind. The devils were an independent race, and darkness profound energy was a power they wielded alone. Chi's indifferent voice cut through the haze of shock. Today, all the so-called devil people in the northern divine region were people who actively or passively corrupted themselves with darkness profound energy. Although they gained the ability to control darkness profound energy and cultivate dark profound arts as a result. Some were even forced to pass it down to the next generation forever. They ultimately weren't true devils. At most, they were half-devils. This applies to all the devil beasts and devil spirits existing in the northern divine region as well. That is why none of you can ever be fully compatible with darkness profound energy, except you. Chi stared at Nanhuang Chanyi and dropped landmine after landmine. Starting now, you are more or less a true devil person. You're saying. Yu Wu's words spilled out of her mouth faster than her conscious thoughts. From today onward, you have complete mastery over your darkness profound energy. Your ability to gather, circulate, and regain darkness profound energy will be many times faster than what you're used to. Although your profound strength hasn't changed one bit, there is no one in the entire northern divine region who is a match for you, assuming that your power levels are identical. Your cultivation speed will be several times faster than before. Darkness profound energy will never consume your life force again, much less spiral out of your control. Its natural effects on your mind will be suppressed to a minimum. Every time Chi spoke, the witches felt as if someone was striking their souls with thunder. As some of the strongest powers in the northern divine region with the highest level of mastery over darkness profound energy, they knew all too well what this transformation meant. It was a complete defiance of the common sense they and the world held toward darkness profound energy. Theoretically, it was something that should only be possible during the ancient times, when the true devil still existed. He is speaking the truth. It almost sounded like Chanyi was sleep-talking. She stared at her hands quietly, her recognition of darkness profound energy having changed forever. Previously, darkness profound energy was to her a powerful blade that could devour anything, including herself if she didn't suppress it from time to time. The possibility that it might spiral out of her control was also very real. But now, it had turned from a double-edged sword into something that was hers and hers alone. It was like a third arm that she could use to do whatever she wanted with perfect control. Chanyi's confirmation and the fearful look on her face, more specifically, the fear that this was all just a dream, left the five witches stunned and speechless for a long time. Also, Chi wasn't quite finished yet. Assuming that you were to leave the northern divine region this moment, you would find that your circulation and recovery speed aren't too different from before. The common sense that a devil person's strength is halved the moment they leave the northern divine region no longer applies to you. If you withdraw your aura completely, you won't even be recognized as a devil person unless you run into a profound practitioner who is much stronger than you are. Maybe it was a dream. The witches of the soul-stealing realm were powerful, but right now they felt as dumb as a toddler. What they didn't know was that the ability to make a creature's body fully compatible with darkness profound energy was just one of the most basic abilities of eternal calamity of darkness. When Chi had used the ability on Dongfang Hanwei for the first time, he had succeeded right away. But because he was unfamiliar with the skill, it took him some time and effort before he succeeded. Now he had fully cultivated the middle realm of eternal calamity of darkness, and he could make anybody compatible with darkness profound energy, even if the target was a witch, a high-level divine master. How long will these abilities last? Yi Li's breathing had obviously become shorter. If everything Chi said was true, forget the witches, even the god emperors would feel exactly the same as them. It will last forever. Chanyi was the one who answered, not Chi. It was her power in every sense of the word. Naturally, she was well aware of its characteristics. The witch's focus fell on Chanyi once more. Yu Wu asked blankly, "Is it true? Is everything he said true?" Chanyi nodded slowly but without any hesitation. Yao Dai suddenly looked at Kai Yinger. "Is this why you were able to fight against me even though it's been less than 3 years since you cultivated darkness profound energy?" The biggest reason Kai Yinger was able to fight Yao Dai, a level 9 divine master despite being only a level 8 divine master, was because of the devil emperor's blood. But she was too lazy to explain herself. So she said, "Your master invited us to her realm at first notice when the rest of you were screaming bloody murder over Chanyi and Yao Dai. Have you all never wondered why?" The witches were as quiet as mice. Chanyi's dreamlike transformation had chased all their anger and grudges out of their minds. "Is this compensation to your satisfaction?" Chi asked. He had just torn apart a common sense of the world, but he looked like he didn't care at all. Chanyi turned to face him with none of the calm she had before. "This is no different from being reborn. I doubt I'll ever be able to repay this favor." It was true. It was a perfect rebirth she never even bothered to desire even in her own dreams. Her earlier grievance seemed as insignificant as a speck of dust compared to this. "Please." Chi abruptly raised his hand and stopped Chanyi before she could give him a bow. "Since you are satisfied, I will assume that my debt is fully settled. If you have any doubts left, you may challenge the 8th witch and see if you can beat her." Cultivation-wise, Chanyi was still weaker than Yu Wu, but her control and recovery speed were far better than before. She might be at a disadvantage at the beginning, but it would only be a matter of time before Yu Wu lost to her. The witches knew each other's strength well, so Chanyi didn't need to bother. She was certain she could beat Yu Wu, who was in the same realm as her. Now that she thought about it, Yun Qi had carried out his promise exactly as he claimed. He really did give her the power to beat Yu Wu in less than 10 breaths. "It's fine," Chanyi said immediately. "Your words are all true, young Master Yun." She didn't realize it, but she was starting to address Yun Qi the way she did in the past again. Yu Wu's lips moved slightly, but she didn't say anything. "Still, I have received far too much." Although Yun Qi had turned her down, Chanyi still said with determination, "The witches of the soul-stealing realm don't owe any favors or grudges. Chanyi will repay this favor one day whether you accept it or not, young Master Yun." Yun Qi gave her a strange smile. "Oh, don't you worry about that, you will." Chanyi. "Hey heh," a chuckle that melted into one's bones suddenly came down from above. The dark clouds parted, and Devil Queen Chi Wuyao slowly descended to the ground. She was followed by 2 white figures. "You really are the man this queen has chosen, Yun Qi. All it took was a little show, and my cute children were awed into obedience." Her feet hit the ground lightly. The smile behind the black fog was as bewitching as it was demonic. The 6 witches bowed toward the Devil Queen in deference the moment she arrived. While they were doing so, Yun Qi looked at the white figures standing behind the Devil Queen, a presence that far exceeded either one of the 6 witches who were already present, an aura that put Kai Yinger on high alert instantly, and a pair of faces that were exactly identical. The pair of white figures hadn't said a word, but their appearance alone was a declaration of their identity. 2 level 10 divine masters, the leader of the 9 witches, the great witch Jai Xin and Jai Ling. Witches never showed their faces to anyone. At the very least, all the witches Yun Qi and Kai Yinger had encountered so far had masked their faces one way or another. However, it looked like the rule didn't apply to the 2 witches standing behind Chi Wuyao. The great witch was dressed in plain white robes. Their clothes were completely devoid of any patterns, and they weren't wearing any jewelry. However, they were so beautiful that just by standing there, they turned that particular corner of the world into an exquisite painting. Their eyes were devoid of any emotion, but it wasn't frigidness that rejected all human contact. It was a kind of indifference toward everything and anything that exists in the world. Chi Wuyao was the one and only exception. It was as if she was the only person in the world who was reflected in their eyes and hearts. Twin sisters weren't rare, but no matter how identical they were to each other, there were always some differences to be found. Normally, an expert could identify those differences immediately with their spiritual perception. Moreover, even if their appearances were exactly identical, it was only natural that their cultivation levels and auras would differ in some ways as they grew up. Anyone with enough spiritual perception should be able to differentiate between twins with ease. But not only did Jai Xin and Jai Ling share the exact same appearance, clothes, and eyes, their life force and aura were identical as well. Even their footsteps and breathing were perfectly in sync. It was as if they were a living mirror of each other. Kai Yinger watched them for a long time with a deep frown on her face. She had seen plenty of twins in her life, and until today she had thought that the rumor of the indistinguishable witches was nothing but a joke. As it turned out, the world was bigger than she had imagined. Yun Qi removed his gaze from Jai Xin and Jai Ling and gave a cold snort at Chi Wuyao. "Must you wait until now to appear?" Kai Yinger narrowed her eyes. The 6 witches looked surprised as well. The meaning behind Yun Qi's words was clear. He knew that Chi Wuyao was somewhere in the area all along. Chi Wuyao smiled. His discovery of her presence hadn't surprised her at all. Curiosity is a woman's nature. Not even I am immune to it. "I'm not going to waste my breath." Yun Qi avoided her gaze and did his utmost to chase her devilish voice out of his soul. "You know why I'm here, so stop wasting my time and get to the point. I'm warning you, my patience is a lot shorter than you think." Yun Qi's words disturbed and angered the witches a bit. No one had ever dared to speak to the Devil Queen this way, no one, but Chi Wuyao simply looked at him and chuckled. "Heh, what an impatient man you are." The anger on the witches' faces turned to astonishment. Not only did Chi Wuyao accept Yun Qi's terrible attitude like it was nothing, everyone could sense that the emotion behind her smile and voice despite fog covering her face. It was almost as if she was trying to seduce him. For an instant, they felt as if the ground was splitting apart beneath their feet. But Chi Wuyao's smile eventually faded away into an invisible, dominant presence. Once again, she looked like the unparalleled devil everyone in the world thought her to be. Yun Chi's desire for revenge was desperate and intense, and she hadn't tried to challenge his patience any longer. She said seriously, "You wish to bathe the 3 divine regions in blood, and this queen wishes to visit all of them. You have an art that defies the natural order, and this queen possesses the perfect medium for you to execute it. Neither of us will find a more perfect collaborator than each other." The witches turned toward their queen in alarm after hearing her declaration. They could already see the dark storms coming their way in the very near future. The northern divine region is ruled by 3 king realms, and out of the 3, the Burning Moon realm and the Yama realm have no plans of changing the current status quo. If I were to attack the 3 divine regions, not only would they not support or acknowledge my efforts, they would do everything in their power to stop me and save their own hides. Therefore, if you and I want to unite all the power in the northern divine region, we must start by taking over the Burning Moon realm and the Yama realm. Although the witches were aware of the Devil Queen's biggest desire since long ago, her words still shook them greatly. Yi Li and Yao Dai turned around and created a gigantic sound isolation barrier together. This was the Soul Sky, a private world none dared to get close without permission. But it was better to be safe than sorry, considering that this was just the beginning of the Devil Queen's controversial statements. Of course, the soul-stealing realm must first have enough power to crush both realms before we take action. Chi Wuyao smiled again as she looked at Yun Chi. In fact, you've proven that you've the ability to do that, and with incredible ease no less. Lord Devil Emperor's eternal calamity of darkness definitely deserves its name. Yun Chi wasn't too surprised to hear the art's name from Chi Wuyao. Eternal calamity of darkness? Yu Wu whispered. The name sounded incredibly familiar, but the memory kept eluding her for some reason. She wasn't exactly wrong. Her subconscious was preventing her from reaching that impossible answer. Wait, Yi Li exclaimed in shock and disbelief. Master, are you talking about that ultimate devil art you told us about, the one that belonged only to the heaven-smiting devil emperor, the eternal calamity of darkness? Oh, why are you so surprised? Chi Wuyao looked at her and smiled slightly. Haven't you witnessed its ability just now? What else besides the heaven-smiting devil emperor's eternal calamity of darkness can transform Chanyi so thoroughly and so miraculously in just a few breaths? Ah! All 6 witches cried out involuntarily in realization. Chi Wuyao continued. Moreover, Yun Chi was able to kill Yan Sanzheng in 1 hit despite only being a level 7 divine sovereign. He may be the heretic god's inheritor, but without the profound veins and power the heaven-smiting devil emperor gifted to him, her origin blood and her origin power no less, it would have been an impossible task. How enviable. The 4 devil emperors were the highest existences of the devil lineage since the beginning of primal chaos. Although they only existed in legends and historical records these days, they were worshipped higher than religion in the northern divine region. It was no wonder that the witches reacted the way they did when they heard that the legendary Yun Chi, the heretic god inheritor, also inherited the power of the heaven-smiting devil emperor. They finally understood why he was able to perform that miraculous transformation on Chanyi in just a couple of breaths. It was because he was using the devil emperor's ability. I will give them all perfect mastery over darkness' profound energy, Yun Chi said indifferently. Not just them. Chi Wuyao picked up immediately where he left off. The core that forms the strength of the soul-stealing realm is the 9 witches, the 27 soul spirits and 3,600 soul attendants. At the minimum, this is the amount of people you need to transmute during the next period of time. This time, even Jai Xin and Jai Ling looked visibly moved. In the eyes of the witches, Chanyi's transformation was a miracle through and through. But the Devil Queen was planning to refine the powers of every witch, every soul spirit, and every soul attendant as well. Could this impossible miracle truly be replicated more than 3,000 times? Acceptable. To their shock, Yun Chi nodded barely without any hesitation whatsoever. It almost looked like he was talking about a small and insignificant thing. You know the northern divine region far better than I do, so I will do my best to cooperate with you in this regard. However, Yun Chi changed his tone suddenly. I will be the one who decides when to devour the Burning Moon realm and Yama realm. Tell me, Chi Wuyao said. Yun Chi knitted his eyebrows and lifted 3 fingers. 3,000 years, Yu Wu subconsciously muttered. The Burning Moon Realm and Yama Realm were superpowers that had stood strong in the northern divine region for hundreds of thousands of years. It was already shocking and unreal enough to claim to be the one to topple them, much less do it in 3,000 years. Was it really possible to pull off such a feat in 3,000 years, even if their core were completely transformed? Okay, Chi Wuyao nodded and accepted the proposal without hesitation. 3 years it is. 3 years. Yili, Yao Dai, Qing Ying, Lan Ting, Yu Wu, Chanyi, and even Jai Xin and Jai Ling couldn't believe their ears at all. This was the Burning Moon and Yama realms they were talking about. No one was denying the power of the eternal calamity of darkness. Given enough time, the increase in cultivation speed and power ceiling alone would snowball the soul-stealing realm's power to the point where it could easily crush the other two king realms. However, that was assuming that they had several thousand years or more for the process to take place. 3 years? That was nothing more than a pipe dream. Instead of explaining herself to the witches, Chi Wuyao suddenly changed the subject and said, "When I was reading through the ancient records, I noticed something that was quite interesting. The heaven-smiting devil emperor was definitely not the strongest of the 4 great devil emperors. But surprisingly, she was the most respected, right? The word respect was used again and again across multiple records when the relationships between the devil emperors were described. All 3 devil emperors respected the heaven-smiting devil emperor. After the heaven-smiting devil emperor fell to the plot of the gods and went missing, fury washed over the other 3 devil emperors, no, the entire devil race. It was one of the major fuses that started the great war between the gods and the devils. Xianxia. The heaven-smiting devil race led by the heaven-smiting devil emperor possessed the strange ability to transform into devil-god swords. But if we were to ignore this special ability, their strength was in fact much poorer than the devils led by the other devil emperors. If they were to leave the heaven-smiting devil emperor's side, they weren't even that much stronger than a normal devil. But the opposite was equally true. If the heaven-smiting devil emperor was close to them, they could slaughter the 3 devil emperor's great devils without breaking a sweat. Legend says that it was caused by a special power called calamity and misfortune. Chi Wuyao's voice turned unusually soft and seductive as stared at Xianxia. I wonder if this part of the record's true or false. Xianxia frowned a little as something dark flashed across his eyes. This woman was much scarier than he had initially imagined. It was fortunate that she was a collaborator, not an enemy, at least not now. He said seriously, I wouldn't show myself to you so soon if I didn't have something up my sleeve. Very good. Chi Wuyao's smile grew wider after she got what she wanted. It looks like our cooperation will be a pleasant one. Kai and Yinger frowned. She had never heard of this calamity and misfortune, and Xianxia definitely hadn't mentioned it to her. However, his reaction to the eerie-sounding name was silent admission. You seem to know far more than you let on, Kai and Yinger said coldly before sneaking a glare at Xianxia. This is the northern divine region. It's only natural that we have more records about the ancient devils than the eastern divine region, isn't it? Chi Wuyao was smiling cheerfully when suddenly she turned toward the southwest. Oh, it seems that we have some guests. The Yama God realms Yan Tu, Yan Yi, and Yan Hu have come to pay a call on the soul-stealing realm's exalted devil queen. We plead for an audience with her. A deep and oppressive voice rang out from the borders of the soul-stealing realm's sacred region. Even though the words and tone used were respectful, they were accompanied by a deathly aura that seemed to come from the bottom of the Yellow Springs, instantly causing the soul-stealing realm's sacred region to fall into an oppressive silence. Countless eyes suddenly turned in the direction the voice had come from, and expressions of shock and amazement appeared on everyone's faces. Because Yan Tu, Yan Yi, and Yan Huo were the names of 3 of the 10 Yama devils. The Yama realm's Yama devils had suddenly come to pay them a visit, and there were 3 of them at that. Within the soul sky, all of the witches started to frown. Yili said in a deep voice, to think that 3 Yama devils would come at once. The last time we received such grand company was when Master was being crowned emperor. What are they up to now? Master, Jai Xin said as she stepped forward, her pure white robes and her long ink-dark hair fluttering in the wind. I will go meet them. Don't bother. Chi Wuyao was not the least bit surprised by the arrival of the 3 Yama devils. Since the Yama realm has shown us such great face, then this queen will go out and personally welcome them. They are not worthy of being greeted by Master personally, Jai Ling said. However, Chi Wuyao had already raised her head, without releasing any profound energy at all. Her voice had already penetrated the sound obstruction barrier that Yi Li and Yao Dai had formed and permeated the air. What happened? When those three faint words fell on everyone's ears, they sounded as soft and ethereal as mist. But when that voice penetrated the soul, it made all the living creatures in the soul-stealing realm's sacred region feel as if the heavens themselves had been overturned, causing all of them to hold their breath. It was also these three words that caused the silent Yun Chi's eyes to suddenly change as they darted towards Chi Wuyao, and his gaze lingered on her for several full breaths before he finally slowly shifted it away. The arrival of the 3 of the 10 Yama devils was no small matter. However, even though they had sent such a grand delegation, they did not harbor any hopes of being able to truly meet with the Devil Queen. After they heard the Devil Queen's unexpected voice, the 3 Yama devils were clearly caught by surprise. A long period of silence passed before their voices finally rang out once more. May the protection of the devil gods bless and keep the Devil Queen. We have specially arrived on the orders of the Yama Emperor to capture that wicked fugitive from the eastern divine region who borrowed the name Ling Yun yesterday and killed the Yama Ghost King without cause or reason. Yun Chi, we hope that the Devil Queen will grant our request and allow us to escort Yun Chi back to our realm. Even though the voices of the 3 Yama devils were hard and cold, everyone could clearly hear fear and reverence contained within them. Because the person they were speaking to right now was the Devil Queen Chi Wuyao. How does the Yama realm know that Yun Chi is here? Chanyi whispered. They probably exposed themselves while they were traveling here, Yu Wu whispered back. After all, the Yama realm launched an all-out hunt for them yesterday. Even if that is the case, this has still happened way too quickly, Lan Ting said in an even softer voice. After all, Yun Chi had just entered the soul-stealing realm, but the Yama realm had already come calling. They had even sent 3 Yama devils over, so it was clear that they were extremely confident that Yun Chi was in this place. Even though the 3 king realms of the northern divine region were in very close proximity to one another, they were still several hours apart. The arrival of the 3 Yama devils at this moment meant only one thing. They had already arrived here before Yun Chi had even taken a single step into the soul-stealing realm. Chi Wuyao's voice filled the air once more. Your Yama realm is not the only one who has a grudge against Yun Chi. Since he has already fallen into this queen's hands, then this queen shall deal with him as I see fit. So what does that have to do with your Yama Emperor? There were 2 reasons why the Yama Emperor had sent 3 Yama devils at once. The first was because Yun Chi's power was simply far too abnormal. He had been able to kill Yan Sanzheng with a single stroke of his sword, so the Yama Emperor was worried that a single Yama devil would not be enough to restrain him. As for the second reason, on the surface it seemed like the Yama Emperor had been utterly enraged by the Yama Ghost King's death. But in truth, Yun Chi's heretic god inheritance and sky poison pearl were things that posed an irresistible attraction to anyone. The Yama devils replied solemnly. We have indeed heard that these 2 wicked fugitives from the eastern region not only hurt a witch, but offended the Devil Queen as well. However, their crimes against you pales in comparison to their murder of our Yama Ghost King. The Yama Emperor is utterly enraged by this turn of events, and he sternly ordered us to drag Yun Chi back to our realm to be punished. So we hope that the Devil Queen will grant our request. Our Yama realm will compensate you well. Chi Wuyao gave a light and tinkling laugh. Since the Yama Emperor regards this matter with such importance, ask him to come and ask for these people himself. This queen will gladly attend to him if he comes. The few of you aren't worthy yet. The Yama devils lapsed into another brief period of silence. When their voices rang out again, they were colder and darker than before. The Yama Emperor gave us an order to bring them back no matter what. This queen has already said all that I want to say. A soft and gentle voice cut the Yama devils off. But after that, the voice that permeated the air suddenly changed. Could it be that you want to hear it a second time? It was a cold which pierced the soul and penetrated the bone. When Yun Chi and Kaianai Yinger had dealt with Chi Wuyao, her voice had been devilish and seductive. In fact, it was so bewitching and seductive that it practically turned their bones to water. However, at this moment, her voice had suddenly turned ice cold, and that sentence made them feel as if they had been transported to the border between an icy hell and death. Every single nerve, every single strand of their souls were trembling and spasming uncontrollably. The entirety of the soul-stealing realm's sacred region fell silent. After a long period of deathly silence, the Yama devils finally spoke once again. We will relay the words of the Devil Queen to our Yama Emperor just as you have spoken them. We take our leave." After they said those words, the auras of the three Yama devils swiftly sped off into the distance. They did not dare take a single step into the soul-stealing realm's sacred region. After the Yama devils left, the Devil Queen's cold might disappeared into thin air. Ching Ting spoke up. "It's so strange. How did the Yama realm know that Yun Chi was here? And how did they get here so quickly?" To the gathered witches, the fact that Yun Chi possessed the power of a devil emperor was an enormous secret. Right now, it was something that was probably only known to the Devil Queen and those who were present. This secret and their alliance were things that absolutely had to be kept under wraps, especially in the beginning. Thus, given the soul-stealing realm's position, they would naturally try to hide or seal away any information regarding these two things with all of their might. "Heh," a cold chuckle rang in the air as Kai-Na Yinger said in a cold voice, "This is something you should ask your master then." Ching Ting glared at her furiously. "Yun Kai-Ning, what do you mean by that?" Kai-Na Yinger ignored Ching Ting as she stared at Chi Wuyao with cold eyes. "Chi Wuyao, the only people who knew that we were coming here were the seventh witch and you. We aren't familiar with this northern divine region, and we had to conceal our auras too, so we couldn't travel at too quick a pace. However, you arrived even later than we did." "What is even stranger?" Kai-Na Yinger said as her lips curled up into a mocking smile and her beautiful eyes grew even colder, "is that only 8 of the 9 witches are present. Even you, the Devil Queen, are present, but the 7th witch remains unaccounted for. Let me guess, just where did she go?" "Shut up!" Kai-Na Yinger's words had undoubtedly incited the wrath of all the witches. "If you dare to slander our master's name again, don't blame us for being impolite." "Ya." Chi Wuyao let out a seductive sigh as she said in a merry voice, "I really couldn't hide it from the two of you. The reason why Hua Jin isn't around is because this queen dispatched her to several places, the first one being the Yama realm itself. Right now, both the Yama realm and the Burning Moon God realm know that you are here. Before long, half of the northern divine region will also find out about this news." The gathered witches were stunned by this revelation, and Yi Li said, "Master, this is the reason." Yun Chi was not anxious or angry. He simply asked for a reason in a calm voice. "Reasons? There are many." Chi Wuyao was even less anxious than Yun Chi, and she entirely ignored the soul-piercing gaze that Kai-Na Yinger was directing toward her. "Then let's just start with the closest and simplest reason. This queen wants people to know that you have fallen into this queen's hands. It's as simple as that. Furthermore, this isn't limited to the northern divine region alone. If we continue to spread the news, the eastern divine region will also hear about this after some time has passed. Especially," her dusky eyes seemed to flash, "the eternal heaven god realm." Chi Wuyao. Kai-Na Yinger could not hold back her rage any longer. Her body blurred, and she closed the distance between her and Chi Wuyao in a single instant. Their gazes collided as they stood less than half a foot from each other. "Just what exactly are you trying to do?" At this moment, she suddenly started to question something that she had insisted on since she had entered the northern divine region, influencing and exhorting Yun Chi to strike up an alliance with the Devil Queen Chi Wuyao. This was the very first day of their alliance, and they had started it without a single hitch. However, she now realized that Chi Wuyao's thinking and actions were beyond her comprehension, and they were also beyond their control. Even as Kai-Na Yinger glared at her from so close that their noses were practically touching, Chi Wuyao simply smiled sweetly as she leaned in a little. It was as if she was admiring what she could see of her unreasonably perfect face. "Speaking of which, this is actually something that you enlightened this queen about." Kai-Na Yinger did not back down one bit. Her voice was ice cold as she said, "You had better give me a proper explanation," Chi Wuyao said. "Since this is an alliance, this queen will definitely give you a nice and proper explanation. After all, the two of you are the true main characters. This insignificant queen is just here to set the wheels of destiny in motion." "How ridiculous," Kai-Na Yinger replied coldly. "In just this matter alone, you've clearly acted entirely on your own. You did not even deign to ask for our opinions or consult with us. By reporting our location to the Yama realm, you've already made us suspect you of foul play. Even now, you still have the face to mention our alliance. You still think that we'll obediently play along with whatever you say or do," Chi Wuyao said with a cheery smile. "How about you wait for this queen to finish first? As for whether we will continue cooperating or not, it's not simply up to you. Speak." Yun Chi spat out a single word. "Then the both of you should listen very closely. Especially you." She directed those last words at Kai and Yinger as she gently pursed her lips. The corners of Kai and Yinger's brows twitched. Yun Kainying, you previously said that the great gift you were giving this queen in compensation for the untamed divine marrow was a marvelous opportunity. You said that I could use this deal that Zhou Zuzi suggested to this queen to utterly enrage him and cause him to launch an all-out attack on the northern divine region in his insane rage and sorrow. Thus, I could use this as a pretext to create an opportunity for myself. When you lay it out like that, it sounds wonderfully perfect, and even this queen can't help but be moved by it. However, after this queen pondered your plan for a moment, I discovered that this great gift of yours seemed to have two glaringly large holes in it. What holes? Kai and Yinger said. The first hole, Chi Wuyao replied, is that your imagined opportunity occurs only after the three king realms have been united, and we have prepared our strength. After that, you plan to enrage the eternal heaven god emperor and bait him into attacking us. You will then use this as an excuse to launch a counterattack using our moral high ground and superior power, while counting on the two other great divine regions, the West and the South, to sit on their hands in the initial stages of the war. However, my soul-stealing realm must rely on Yun Chi's power if we are to swallow up both the Burning Moon realm and the Yama realm. Moreover, any war with another king realm, no matter how small it is, will shake up the entire northern divine region, and this will naturally be news that can be easily obtained by the king realms of the eastern divine region. If that is the case, the eternal heaven god emperor will naturally find out that this queen did not capture Yun Chi but is working together with him instead. Why then would he take the bait and deliver his son to us? Heh! Kai and Yinger sneered disdainfully. As the soul-stealing devil queen, don't you even have the ability to seal away this tiny bit of news? Seal away? Chi Wuyao gave a disdainful smile of her own. There isn't anything in this universe that is more momentous than a war between king realms, so how exactly am I supposed to seal that kind of news? How about this? Since you once held the title of Brahma monarch goddess, why don't you tell this queen something? No matter how hard I try to contain the news of such a momentous event occurring in the northern divine region, is the eastern divine region's ability to gather information truly so lousy that they'll be none the wiser while it is happening? Kai and Yinger did not respond. Now let's proceed to the second hole in your plot, Chi Wuyao continued. Let's assume that none of my fears come true, and everything goes exactly as you wished, and we provoke the eternal heaven god emperor's rage after we complete our preparations. How can you be so sure that he will definitely lash out in rage and attack the northern divine region with the full might of the eternal heaven god realm? Kai and Yinger said in a low voice, based on the guilt he harbors towards his dead wife, based on the fact that he places Zhou Qingchen's life above everyone else's, based on the fear and panic he will experience when he witnesses Yun Chi's growth, aren't all of these reasons enough? How would this queen know if those reasons are good enough? Chi Wuyao said. However, this queen does know one thing at the very least, and it is that a person can't even control their own thoughts sometimes. If you gamble on what you think another person may do, it often ends up as a bad joke. She glanced towards them and said, I mean, aren't both of you that sort of joke as well? You! Kai and Yinger's golden hair flared up around her and black light flashed in her eyes, but she could not truly bring her anger to a full boil. They, who had once respectively held Zhou Zuzi and Kai and Fanchen in the highest regard, had ended up in such a state. So how exactly was she mistaken when she called them that sort of joke? Moreover, from this queen's perspective, if that Zhou Zuzi truly values Zhou Qingchen that much, he actually won't launch an all-out assault against the northern divine region after Zhou Qingchen dies. Because Zhou Qingchen's death will not only cause him to go insane with anger, it will also cause him to feel shame. Since the person has already died, the last thing he can do for his son will be to do his best to protect his reputation. Zhou Zuzi won't allow the people of the world to find out about the fact that his son was transformed into a devil. Launching an all-out assault in a fit of pure rage would vent his anger for a moment, but it would also greatly harm the eternal heaven god realm. It would also very likely expose the fact that Zhou Qingchen had been transformed into a devil, expose the fact that he was the one who broke the taboo and tried to make a deal with this queen. It would also result in many other unforeseeable consequences. But if he buries his anger and chooses not to act despite the fires of rage burning within his heart, he will be able to preserve the last of Zhou Qingchen's dignity while not exposing himself to any of the things I just mentioned. Chi Wuyao drew even closer to Kai and Yinger. You definitely understand far better than this queen just how much the eternal heaven god realm is repulsed by the word devil, and how disgraceful it would be for any one of them to become devils. So which option do you think he will lean towards? Oh, that's right. Without waiting for Kai and Yinger's response, Chi Wuyao suddenly said, "This queen will first help you recall one thing: Zhou Yuzi's age, experience, and time spent as emperor also far exceeds Kai and Fanchins. Moreover, during his time as emperor in the Eastern Divine Region, no, in fact, in all three divine regions, he has always been the most esteemed and respected god emperor of them all. Kai and Yinger. Just how likely is it for a person like that to lose complete control of his emotions due to extreme rage?" Kai and Yinger's hands were tightly clenched. Even though rage simmered in her heart, she was not the sort of person who would fly off the handle easily. Furthermore, Chi Wuyao's words had actually left her speechless for the moment. When she had described her plan to Yun Qi, she had explained just how special Zhou Qingchen was to Zhou Yuzi, and that she was about 60% confident that Zhou Yuzi would go berserk if he died. However, she did not have enough time to make sure her plan was completely foolproof. When she heard the words that Chi Wuyao just said, even though she really did not want to acknowledge them, she could not help but come to the sudden realization that the chance of the plan succeeding were truly only 10% or so, maybe even less. She was very familiar with Zhou Yuzi's past relationship with his proper wife. As a result, she was utterly convinced that Zhou Qingchen was Zhou Yuzi's greatest and perhaps only weakness. Yet she had overlooked such an important point, and that was Zhou Qingchen's reputation and dignity, something that would exist even after his death. However, after she had given Chi Wuyao a simple explanation of her plan, she had actually perceived this gaping hole in her plan, a hole that she had always overlooked after just half a day. This woman, since that is the case, why did you deliberately publicize Yun Qi's whereabouts and allow this news to leak out to the Eastern Divine Region? Kai and Yinger asked. Of course it's to borrow your suggestion and lure him into meeting this queen with Zhou Qingchen in tow, Chi Wuyao said. Now, of course. Kai and Yinger did not flare up immediately. She pondered Chi Wuyao's words for a brief period of time before she spoke in a low voice. Let's not even mention uniting the three king realms first. If we enrage the eternal heaven god realm now without even taking the first step in our plans, it would be akin to wasting the best opportunity we have right now. And if he truly goes berserk from rage and launches an all-out attack against the northern divine region, it will be at a time when we haven't even been able to stand firmly yet. Even talking about using this opportunity to launch a counterattack will be nothing more than a huge joke. He won't, Chi Wuyao chuckled dryly. Even if he does, it is of no matter. If this land of darkness were so easily conquered, how could it still be standing to this very day? Then what exactly do you mean to accomplish by doing this? Kai and Yinger's mind swiftly raced through several possibilities, but none of them made any sense to her. It's very simple. As long as he comes here, that will be enough. That was Chi Wuyao's reply. Yun Qi, who had been silently listening to Chi Wuyao all this while, suddenly spoke up. What do you mean by that? There is a very colorful proverb that I believe that two of you have heard before. Chi Wuyao's eyebrows arched a little as she softly whispered those words in a breathy voice. If yellow mud stains your pants, it's treated as shit even if it isn't actually shit. The soul sky lapsed into a long period of silence after she said those words. When Kai and Yinger raised her head once more, she finally understood Chi Wuyao's intentions. She gave a low and hearty laugh as she said, "When it comes to being despicable and underhanded, I am indeed still far inferior to you." Those words were both a mocking jibe and a wistful sigh. Chi Wuyao's smile remained fixed on her face, and her devilish voice grew effusive. When this queen has to choose between relying on an opportunity someone delivered up to me versus a scheme I have personally crafted, the difference being that the former is passive while the later is active, I far prefer to take the active option. After all, being the one who sets the gears in motion and being the one who has to passively endure anything that happens to them are two completely different things altogether. Yun Kainying, don't you agree? Kai Yinger's eyebrows furiously twitched, and she turned her head sharply away from Chi Wuyao. However, she had already unconsciously softened her stance. As her smile grew more reserved, Chi Wuyao turned around and said something quite mysterious. This queen has always disdained these sorts of wicked and petty tricks. However, if it is that Zhou Yuzi we're talking about, then that's an entirely different story. She had said those last words with a deeply hidden malice. Yun Qi, you will cooperate with me in this matter, right? Chi Wuyao said. However, she already knew what his reply would be before he even answered, because Yun Chi was looking forward to this more than anyone else. When, Yun Chi said, Kai and I Yinger did not object either. Chi Wuyao gave a soft chuckle as she said, given the degree to which the northern divine region and eastern divine region are isolated from each other, it might take as long as a month before Zhou Zuzi finds out that you've fallen into this queen's hands. We should also conveniently mix in some fragmented rumors that you've angered this queen on multiple occasions. At that time, he will definitely send a sound transmission to me as soon as he possibly can and arrange for us to meet. As for when this meeting will take place, it cannot be too soon or too long. If it takes too long, it will gradually wear his patience down, and a long delay will naturally give rise to hitches in the plan. If we move too quickly, if this queen does not take the opportunity to demand the world from him and tries to press him into a meeting at the first available opportunity, it will arouse suspicion in him instead. How does 100 days sound to you? Her eyes swept past both Yun Chi and Kai Yinger. To her surprise, she discovered that strange fluctuations had occurred in their auras when she had proposed the date, fluctuations that should not have appeared at all. Oh, her eyes narrowed slightly. Could it be that the amount of time I proposed is not to your liking? No. Yun Chi opened his mouth and both his expression and voice were devoid of irregularities. I find this amount of time very much to my liking. Chi Wuyao. Kai Yinger quietly shot a glance at Yun Chi and bit back the words she was about to say. At this time, a gentle breeze brushed by them, and a woman covered in twinkling rainbow light floated down towards them. It was the seventh witch Hua Jin. With her arrival, all 9 of the soul-stealing realm's witches had been assembled before Yun Chi and Kai Yinger's eyes. Reporting to Master, Hua Jin greeted Chi Wuyao. Young Master Yun's bedchambers have been prepared. MNN. Chi Wuyao replied softly. She turned towards Yun Chi, a sweet and beautiful smile on her face. Yun Chi, you've been forced to live as a fugitive for the past few years. Since you're already here, why don't you allow yourself to rest for a single day? From tomorrow onward, it'll be hard to find a moment to relax even if you want to. Chanyi, escort Yun Chi and Yun Kainying to their bedchambers. Today you will serve outside the palace. If they desire to tour the sacred region, you will be in charge of guiding them. Yes, Chanyi replied. Even though she had been entrusted the role of attendant, despite her status as a witch, she did not feel too repulsed by the role she had been assigned to. After all, there was no way that she could truly repay Yun Chi for the gift he had given her. Yun Chi gave a very disinterested nod of his head. Chi Wuyao turned her devilish body around, her gaze coming to rest on each and every one of her 9 witches. Jai Xin, Jai Ling, Yili Yao Dai, Qing Ying, Lan Ting, Hua Jin, Yu Wu, Chanyi. When she recited the names of each of her 9 witches, her voice containing a gentleness reserved just for them. This queen has described her dream of the future to all of you many times. In the past, this would always be a foolish wish, an extravagant hope. However, the day I have waited for has suddenly come, and my dream starts from this day forward. This queen cannot even begin to imagine what the future will hold, so it is even more impossible for me to promise you anything. In fact, I might even end up being unable to protect all of you. As such, Master, you need not say another thing, Jai Xin said. Your life and your dream are the very reasons for our existence. The other 8 witches did not say anything, but their eyes were saying the exact same thing. Fine. Chi Wuyao nodded her head, a faint smile on her face. Indeed, there was no need for any useless words between her and her witches. Then all of you may leave. The gathered witches dispersed. From this day on, the arc of their fates and the very world they lived in would undergo an enormous upheaval, all because of Yun Chi's arrival. Young Master Yun, please. Chanyi arrived at Yun Chi's side, and she now displayed a degree of deferential respect towards him. As she recalled their encounter in the central nether ruins, her heart was filled with boundless rueful emotions. Yun Chi glanced at Chi Wuyao, but he did not say a single word. He turned around and followed Nanwang Chanyi out of the soul sky. However, Kai Yinger, who was moving alongside Yun Chi, suddenly stopped the moment Yun Chi descended out of the soul sky. She turned her body slightly as she spoke to Chi Wuyao in a cold voice. Chi Wuyao, you truly do know how to pick a date. What exactly is wrong with the date that I've chosen? Chi Wuyao asked. A complex look flashed through Kai Yinger's eyes, and she gave a soft sigh as she said, 100 days from now, it will be his daughter's 18th birthday. Chi Wuyao was stunned by that revelation. Also, remember these words well. Kaina Yinger's back faced Chi Wuyao as her voice turned frosty. I admit that I am your inferior in certain aspects. Oh. Chi Wuyao's eyebrows arched as amusement played across her face. However, that is only because I am far younger than you are. If we were the same age, I would definitely be far superior to you. Chi Wuyao gave a laugh as she replied in that soft and cottony voice. Are you sure that difference between us lies only in our ages? Kaina Yinger's brows sank slightly. Every single person in the northern divine region knows the name Brahma Monarch Goddess, Chi Wuyao said in a languid manner. The legendary Brahma Monarch Goddess has extraordinary talent and succeeds in everything she tries her hand at. There is nothing that you cannot obtain, no person you cannot trick. However, are all of these achievements truly because of your excellent and exceedingly cruel schemes, or are they because of the Brahma Monarch God realm that backed you up at every turn, the Brahma Monarch God realm that no one even dares to offend? Then what about you? Kaina Yinger retorted sarcastically. The northern region's devil queen Chi Wuyao, a woman who rose from a middle star realm king to a higher realm king before finally becoming a god emperor. However, you did this by riding on one man after the other. How wise and brilliant you were. Ha 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 ha. Chi Wuyao laughed loudly, but no one in this universe would understand the meaning behind her laughter. She raised her eyes to the heavens and said in a carefree voice, all the men of this world who have risen to high places, the women who catch their eyes will only ever be lesser than they are. If that is the case, then why can't a woman see men as her lessers and use them as tools? Kaina Yinger. This queen started off as a common mortal woman, but with my own 2 feet, I climbed up to the top by trotting on these stepping stones that these men personally laid out for me. Whether it was their sect, their lives, their families, or even their king realm. Until not a single man in this universe dared to look down on this queen in the slightest. So you, someone who has been born into the lap of luxury, someone who has always stood at the highest point in this universe, are the one person in the universe who is the least qualified to look down on this queen. Kaina Yinger stood rooted in place, and she could not bring herself to say anything for a long time. However, Chi Wuyao's tone suddenly changed again, and it now contained several hints of playful mockery. The emotions she was putting on full display seemed to forever be changing according to her own fickle mood, and no one could even guess at what she was going to do next. There really isn't any need for you to harbor such enmity towards this queen, and there is even less of a need for you to feel such a huge sense of peril. After all, you were the one who was by his side constantly during his darkest years. This is something that no one can change, no one can replace. And it was also the same for you. What do you mean by that? Kaina Yinger's head violently whipped towards her. A good question. Chi Wuyao gave a dry laugh as her feet crossed the borders of the soul sky. This is a question that you have to ask yourself, and it is also a question that only you can answer accurately. This queen is merely blathering on pointlessly. With a seductive laugh that was so soft and charming that it melted straight into the bone, Chi Wuyao flew into the distance. Only Kaina Yinger was left standing within the soul sky, and she stayed inside for a long period of time. God realm at the bottom of the eternal heaven tower. The entire place was a sea of gray. There were only a few dim pinpricks of light coming from the profound jade set in the area. It was not just limited to light. Everything in this place was isolated from the outside world, including sound and even aura. This was the most important place amongst important places in the eternal heaven God realm. If one did not obtain personal permission from the eternal heaven God Emperor, they would not be able to step inside, no matter who they were. However, at this moment, layer after layer of the barriers were being peeled back. Zhou Qingchen quietly sat in the center of this dim, dark space. This was the 229th day he had spent here. He could remember the time he had spent here all too clearly, because every single day he had spent in this place felt far longer than any other period of his 1,000-year lifespan. In the past, whenever he had started a closed-door training session that lasted several years, he had been able to pass the time in quiet meditation. However, these few short months had made him realize just how dreadfully slow the flow of time could be. Bzz. A sound rang in the air, and he saw that the great door that had been sealed for a long time was being slowly and carefully pushed open. The soft sound that had rung in the air at first had now also completely dissipated. As the door was pushed wide, a ray of light shone into the area. It was not too bright, yet it caused Zhou Qingchen to unconsciously raise his hand and shield his face. After being confined to this dark place for so long, he clearly longed for the light. Yet such a faint ray seemed so glaring to him, because the current him had become a devil. Royal Father. Zhou Qingchen stood up and made a formal bow. Zhou Yuzi slowly walked inside. In just the span of a few short months, he seemed to have aged yet again. However, that mild and gentle smile still remained on his face. Qingchen, how have you been lately? Zhou Qingchen replied, reporting to Royal Father. During the last half a month, the darkness, profound energy within my body has not been agitated at all, and this child has been a lot calmer as well. That's good then. Zhou Yuzi smiled as he nodded his head. The situation is far better than I had imagined. This also means that our ancestor has been protecting you from the shadows, so you need to believe that there will definitely be a day when this darkness energy will be purged from your body. This time, Zhou Qingchen did not give the same reply as he always had. Instead, he suddenly said, Royal Father, this child has constantly been thinking over things during this period of time, and I suddenly thought of something that I perhaps should not even be thinking of, and I don't know if I should even ask Royal Father about it. Heh, there's no need to hold anything back. Feel free to ask me anything, Zhou Yuzi replied. He was the real reason for everything that had befallen Zhou Qingchen. Due to the pain in his heart and the deep guilt he felt toward him, he was far warmer to Zhou Qingchen than he ever had been. This child wants to ask. Zhou Qingchen still hesitated even after he had started to speak. But upon seeing his father's warm and gentle gaze, he finally managed to ask the question. Is darkness profound energy truly so unforgivable and impermissible? Oh. Zhou Yuzi started to frown, but he still kept a warm smile on his face as he replied, Darkness profound energy is a symbol of negative energy. If darkness profound energy disappears from this world, it will also mean there will no longer be any sinful powers existing in this world. This is especially true for those of us who have inherited the legacy of the gods. Exterminating all of the darkness profound energy in the universe is a duty that has been passed down from generation to generation. A duty so ingrained that nothing need be said about it. Why did you suddenly ask such a question? Ever since Zhou Qingchen had started cultivating the profound way, he had heard Zhou Yuzi and many other people say these exact words to him countless times. In the past, he had never once doubted them, because to him it had simply been common sense, just like how water and fire could not mix. As he looked into his father's eyes, he finally verbalized the truest doubt that had formed in his heart. The devils who possess darkness profound energy will have their humanity eradicated by it. They will become cruel, bloodthirsty, and violent. They will not hesitate to do anything, commit any crime for their own gain. Darkness profound energy is a heresy in this universe, and as profound practitioners of the God realm, we must do our very best to destroy it, no matter whether it exists in the form of devil people, devil beasts, or devil spirits. Ever since I've become a devil, I've always been terrified that my humanity would be slowly eroded by the darkness profound energy within me, that I'd become a heartless and inhumane monster. Zhou Yuzi. He lifted both of his hands, and as profound energy circulated within his body, a layer of black energy slowly appeared over his palms. His fingers did not tremble, and his eyes and voice remained calm. It's already been more than 7 months, and the darkness profound energy in my body has been rioting less and less frequently. My body has already completely adapted to its existence, and compared to what it was like initially, I have now become a true devil person. But, he slowly closed his eyes, why is it that I am not degenerating into some kind of beast? My sense of rationality, my sense of right and wrong still clearly remain. The things that I have never been willing to do in the past, the things that I could never bring myself to do in the past, that hasn't changed one bit. I still don't want to do those things. I still can't do those things. The only negative change that I have truly noticed is that my mood will become violent and aggressive whenever my darkness profound energy starts to riot. He raised his hands even higher as the darkness profound energy covering them grew even more dense. Royal Father, could it be that darkness profound energy isn't that dreadful? Could it be that what we've always known about darkness profound energy, about devils, has been mistaken from the very start? That's enough. That furious rebuke robbed Zhou Yuzi's face of all of its warmth. As the universe's most upright God Emperor, the God Emperor who lived to destroy all darkness and sin, he was not able to believe or accept such words. And they had actually come from his own son, the son he had personally chosen as the successor to the throne of the eternal heaven God realm. What sort of disgraceful behavior was this? Zhou Yuzi, who very rarely lost his temper, was about to slap his son. his eyes flaring in anger. But the moment he saw the dark energy in Zhou Qingchen's palm, his eyes trembled, and he forcefully suppressed the rage that had welled up inside of him. Instead, he stretched out a palm and instantly dispersed the darkness energy that Zhou Qingchen had released. "Qingchen, how could you say such a thing?" Zhou Yuzi forcefully maintained his calm expression, but his voice still trembled as he said those words. "Darkness energy is a heresy that should not exist in this world. It has ever been that way. It is the teachings of our ancestors, the way of heaven." As Zhou Yuzi rebuked him, the normally respectful and obedient Zhou Qingchen suddenly retreated a single step. When he started to speak again, his voice had grown far graver. "If darkness is truly a sin that cannot be tolerated, then why? Why did the heaven-smiting devil emperor sacrifice herself and all of her kinsmen in order to save the world? Why did the heavenly slaughter star god, the one who controlled the evil infant's wheel of myriad tribulations, expose herself to the possibility of being trapped and annihilated by making an appearance at the wall of primal chaos? Why did she help to seal it? Why did Yun Qi, who clearly possessed darkness' profound energy, face the heaven-smiting devil emperor all by himself in order to save this world?" "Shut up, Pa." The long sleeve of his robe flew in the air as he slapped Zhou Qingchen so hard that he sent him flying. Zhou Yuzi's hair and beard stood on end as his entire body shook. "Qingchen, do you even know what you are saying? You've already gone mad. The darkness' profound energy has already started to devour your reason, erode your very nature. Wake up." K. Zhou Qingchen leaned against a wall as he slowly stood up. He used a finger to wipe away the blood trickling from the corner of his lips and bent his head down low. He started to speak slowly. "A person whose mind isn't clear will only rant and rave like a lunatic. He will speak complete nonsense and gibberish. However, what this child has just described are things that both Royal Father and I have personally witnessed, personally experienced." "I thought I told you to shut up." Bang. All of Zhou Yuzi's blood rushed to his head as the profound jade beneath his feet exploded into fine powder and flew everywhere. Zhou Qingchen's long hair had fallen into disarray, and his breathing was violent and heavy. He slowly knelt to the ground, his head deeply bowed. "This child has spoken rashly and offended you with his words. I beg Royal Father for his forgiveness." However, to Zhou Qingchen, these last 229 days, the darkest days of his life, had also become the period in which his mind was most clear. It was only after having darkness within him that he truly came to understand it. Perhaps this was truly the most cruel aspect of Yun Qi's first act of revenge against the eternal heaven. He had not only destroyed the body of their successor, but also obliterated his long-held beliefs and convictions. Blood slowly dripped from the corner of Zhou Qingchen's lips, and every drop that splashed against the ground stabbed at Zhou Yuzi's heart. All of his rage soon transformed into a piercing pain. He let out a long sigh and slowly strode forward. As he tapped a finger in the air, profound light dimly flashed, and the red mark on Zhou Qingchen's face started to fade. "Qingchen," he slowly said, "don't you worry, I've already found a way to help you recover. No matter what price I have to pay, I'll definitely see it through. This is something that I, your father, swear to you, my most important son." "This child believes Royal Father," Zhou Qingchen replied softly. However, his head still remained bowed under his disheveled hair, and he did not raise it up to look at him. Zhou Yuzi turned around and left the room. His footsteps did not make a single sound, but he felt as if they were as heavy as a mountain. As he walked through the layers of barriers, Zhou Yuzi did not leave the Eternal Heaven Tower. Instead, he went to the lowest floor of the tower, the most secret place in the Eternal Heaven God realm. That was where the Eternal Heaven Pearl lay. It was just that his footsteps were erratic. At times they were heavy and plodding, and at other times they were light and quick. "The teachings of our ancestors, the will of the Eternal Heaven, something I've pursued all of my life, something I've devoted half of my life to. How could it be wrong? How could it be wrong?" he mumbled over and over again. During this period of time, he had come to consult the spirit of the Eternal Heaven Pearl in hopes that he could find a way to save Zhou Qingchen amongst its ancient memories. But he received the same reply every single time, and it was that, if Yun Qi could forcibly inject it into his body, then he will also be able to purge it from his body, and that is the only possible way. Just as he wanted to step into the forbidden area where the Eternal Heaven Pearl lay, a sound transmission suddenly rang in his mind. This sound transmission caused him to come to a sudden halt. His body violently trembled as he spun on his heel and swiftly flew out of the tower. When he left the Eternal Heaven Tower, Honorable Tai Yu was already waiting for him in the main hall. Zhou Yuzi landed in front of him and spoke in a grave voice. Tai Yu, is what you're saying true? I am absolutely sure. Honorable Tai Yu slowly raised his head. Given his position, if he was not absolutely sure, even if he could say it with 99% certainty, he still would not use those 4 words. Do you have any details? Zhou Yuzi said. Honorable Tai Yu shook his head. It's hard to find any details. Xianxia has indeed fallen into the hands of the soul-stealing realm's devil queen, and the Yama realm has even tried to get him from them before. The Yama realm? Zhou Yuzi gave a slight frown. MN, Honorable Tai Yu said. Even though Xianxia possesses darkness profound energy, he is still viewed as someone from the eastern divine region by the people of the northern divine region. Due to the ancient grudges and enmity that exists between both realms, they would naturally view him as a heresy to be snuffed out once they discovered his identity. It is also possible that the king realms of the northern divine region have heard about his heretic god inheritance and the sky poison pearl. Xianxia definitely won't have a good time in the northern divine region once his identity has been exposed. The reason he even appeared in the god realm of absolute beginning in the first place was probably because his identity had been exposed. He fled to the god realm of absolute beginning to hide from the people trying to hunt him down. But after he harmed Qingchen and exposed his whereabouts, he was forced to flee back to the northern divine region once more. Also, before he fell into the Devil Queen's hands, it seems like he had already deeply offended her. As for the Yama realm, it seems like he killed one of their important personages. Given the circumstances at hand, it seems like Xianxia is still surrounded by enemies, even though he's grown bizarrely strong. No one would be surprised by this news if they heard it, no matter whether it was due to Xianxia's identity or the secrets that he possessed. Zhou Yuzi fell into his thoughts for a brief moment before saying, "Approximately when did this occur?" "It should be about a month ago," Honorable Tai Yu replied. After that, he frowned and said, "The Devil Queen clearly made an agreement with us at first. However, after she obtained him, she did not do anything for an entire month. It might very well be that she has no intention of using Xianxia to broker a deal after she captured him. After all, how could she let go of the secrets that Xianxia possesses?" "No," Zhou Yuzi replied as he slowly shook his head. "A secret in the end is still a secret. It cannot be seen or perceived. However, the bargaining chip I've laid on the table is one that she cannot resist. What's more, my only condition is for her to force Xianxia to expel the darkness in Zhou Qingchen's body, and I've sworn that I won't suddenly try to kill him or take him back to the eastern divine region, so she has even less reason to refuse. She must have been confident that I would receive this news sooner or later. She is waiting for me to contact her first." Honorable Tai Yu gave a soft sigh. He knew that even if Zhou Yuzi was completely put on the back foot, he would still definitely bend to her demands. The queen of those devils is cunning and rapacious. The more anxious I seem, the higher a price she will demand. However, Qingchen can't afford to wait. The darkness has already started to eat away at his mind. He's slowly being transformed by it day by day. If we wait too long, I fear that he might reach the point of no return. AI. Zhou Yuzi looked completely exhausted. However, the good thing is that she truly managed to capture Xianxia. Honorable Tai Yu looked at Zhou Yuzi before saying, "However, it looks like my lord does not seem to be too worried about this deal." Zhou Yuzi stared into the space in front of him as he slowly said, "That bargaining chip is something that is impossible for her to reject. In fact, it is impossible for anyone to reject." Honorable Tai Yu's brow deeply furrowed as he asked, "My lord, what bargaining chip are you going to use exactly?" But the moment those words left his mouth, he suddenly thought of something and his expression immediately changed. He stuttered in alarm, Could it be?" Zhou Yuzi closed his eyes, but he did not say anything else. A look of shock froze on Honorable Tai Yu's face, and it took a long time for him to regain his composure. He let out a long and drawn-out sigh before he said, "My lord has devoted half of his life to the eternal heaven and the world. You are finally living for yourself just this once." Zhou Yuzi slowly said, "After this matter is over, I will no longer be the eternal heaven's emperor, so Qingchen will have to pay back this debt himself." "Tai Yu, thank you for those words," he said in a heartfelt voice. Even though Honorable Tai Yu had just said those short few words, they had greatly comforted his heart and soul. Honorable Tai Yu chuckled as he shook his head. "There's no need for such words between us brothers. There's just one thing I'm worried about. That Devil Queen is not only supremely cunning, her soul power is also dreadful and bizarre. We already experienced it once. You must be careful." "Don't worry," Zhou Yuzi said. "If I did not make thorough preparations first, how would I dare to step inside the borders of the northern region? Before this happens, the most important matter is how I can hide my actions and cover my tracks. Tai Yu, I'll have to leave that part to you." "Do not worry, my lord." Tai Yu left after he withdrew his sound isolation barrier. As far as he could recall, this was the first time Zhou Yuzi had truly acted selfishly since he had become emperor. And perhaps only Zhou Qingchen could make him behave in such a manner. Chi impassively stood in the middle of the soul-stealing realm's sacred region. He stretched out an arm, his palm facing a bewitchingly beautiful man who was seated on the ground with his eyes closed. This was the spirit lord of the soul-stealing realm's 27 soul spirits, Xianxia. A few dozen people were standing around him in silence. If anyone were to see who these people were, they would be completely flabbergasted. Devil Queen Chi Wuyao, the 9 witches, and the 27 soul spirits. All of the 37 core members of the soul-stealing realm were gathered in this place, and that included the Devil Queen herself. Not a single one of them was absent. The 27 soul spirits were each in charge of their own star region, and the 9 witches were seldom in the realm. It was an exceedingly rare thing for all of them to gather in one place. In fact, it was an event that might not even happen once a millennium. Yun Qi withdrew his arm, and after the black light had faded, the dark refinement of the last soul spirit had been perfectly completed. Xianxia opened his eyes and started to circulate his profound energy. Even though he had long ago witnessed the rebirth of each and every soul spirit, all of his blood started to churn with excitement when he sensed the dreamlike change that had occurred in his body. He did not rise to his feet. Instead, he got on his knees and gave Yun Qi a heavy bow. After that, he spoke with great emotion in his voice. "This Xian thanks young Master Yun for this heavenly blessing. At first, this Xian had eyes but could not see, and I rudely offended you. Young Master Yun may deal with me as he pleases. This Xian will never utter a single word of complaint." He had achieved perfect compatibility with the darkness profound energy in his body. This was a pinnacle of darkness that none of the previous god emperors of the northern divine region had ever reached. Even the 2 words, heavenly blessing, were not enough to describe such a gift. This was a genuine divine miracle, yet Yun Qi seemed to be able to perform it with no effort at all. In fact, he had even mass-produced this miracle. When any of them even began to ponder this notion, they realized that the emotion they felt the most was not admiration or reverence. It was a fear so strong that it sent shudders through their bodies. Today, no matter whether it was the witches or the soul spirits, not a single one of them were puzzled by the Devil Queen's attitude towards Yun Qi any longer. If the Burning Moon God realm or the Yama realm knew about this ability of Yun Qi's, they would come to the soul-stealing realm begging on their knees. Yun Qi made no reaction as he turned around. To him, everything in the soul-stealing realm was nothing more than a tool. He would use them and they would use him. It was as simple as that, and he felt absolutely nothing towards them. All the effort he was making today was for his own future benefit. In fact, he expected to get a payoff worth several times the effort he put in. Now, every single one of the 9 witches and 27 soul spirits had undergone this refinement and had achieved their rebirth of darkness. In other words, it was only now that all of them had become true devil people of darkness. "The 3,600 soul attendants are up next," Yun Qi said in a bored voice. It was as if he was talking about a simple, everyday affair. But those words were so shocking that every single one of the 27 soul spirits nearly fell to their knees. Even to the soul spirits of the soul-stealing realm who possessed the power of a divine master, obtaining this sort of blessing was something they could only dream of. But to think, he actually even wanted to bestow this gift on all of the soul attendants. This was madness, right? What sort of monster was this man called Yun Qi? Was he the reincarnation of one of the primordial devil gods? Chi Wuyao said, "All of the soul attendants have already started to gather. You may begin tomorrow." "Master," Qingying suddenly said, "there are 3,600 soul attendants after all. If all of them were to gather in one place, it's possible that our actions will be quickly exposed." "Isn't it better if we are exposed?" Chi Wuyao said with a faint smile on her face. Ah, Qingying could not comprehend the Devil Queen's words, and a puzzled expression crossed her face. "However," Chi Wuyao continued as her tone changed once more, Before we settle that matter, it is indeed better to hide it for the time being, just to prevent any needless complications. Before we meet the eternal heaven god emperor, all soul attendants are to be confined to the sacred region so you won't need to worry about it. She had said those words mainly for Yun Chi and Kai Yinger's benefit, but at the same time, she was also giving a warning to the 27 soul spirits, the ones who commanded the soul attendants. Devil Queen, please do not worry, Xianxia replied solemnly. Without the Devil Queen's command, if even half a word of this is breathed outside, I, Xianxia, will kill myself to atone for my crimes. Very good, Chi Wuyao said. From tomorrow onward, send 100 people here every day. We will complete the rebirth of all of the soul attendants within a month. Dispatching people is a small matter, but I'm sure that all of you are aware of the meaning that lies behind this action. This matter concerns far more than the fate of our soul-stealing realm. Chi Wuyao's tone was not heavy at all, but it sent a violent shudder through the hearts of all the soul spirits. Even after they had left, torrents of emotion were still crashing about in their hearts like tidal waves. After all of the 27 soul spirits had received their orders and left, Yi Li stepped forward and said, Master, we sisters and the rest of the soul spirits have achieved perfect compatibility with the darkness. Only Master is left. Just as Yi Li had finished speaking, a cold and apathetic voice rang in the air. She doesn't need it. Yi Li was stunned by that revelation, and the rest of the witches were also taken aback. Kai Yinger suddenly glanced to the side, her elegant eyebrows knitting together slightly. A small smile crossed Chi Wuyao's face, but she ignored their reactions and said, Yun Chi, the 3 years that you have set is too short a period of time for this queen's beloved children. They won't be able to grow much within this period of time. However, this queen believes that you definitely have a way to swiftly quicken their growth, right? Her eyebrows arched wickedly as she shot Yun Chi an exceedingly amorous and seductive glance. Of course there is. The one who replied was not Yun Chi, it was Kai Yinger. Her eyes narrowed wickedly as she said, Do you want to hear it? All of the witches turned their gazes towards Kai Yinger in anticipation. Because all of the things that they had thought were impossible had been realized by Yun Chi, they now believed that he could make anything a reality. After all, 3 years ago, Kai Yinger had merely been a half-crippled divine sovereign, but now she could stand toe-to-toe with fourth witch Yao Dai. However, Chi Wuyao realized what method she was talking about nearly instantly. She laughed alluringly as her devilish voice grew cottony. How about we forget it? That's a method that belongs solely to you. How can this queen's children be so impolite as to share it with you? Oh no, I actually welcome it very much. Kai Yinger matched Chi Wuyao's beautiful smile with one of her own. It'd be best if all 9 of them did it together, so I can take a good long look at the true beauty of the soul-stealing realm's 9 witches. It'll definitely be a feast for the eyes. The 9 witches exchanged glances, but all of them were completely mystified by this exchange of words. It was as if they had suddenly been pulled into a misty labyrinth. Chi Wuyao's beautiful eyes narrowed, and she appeared both intrigued and a little shocked at Kai Yinger's reaction. However, she seemed to realize something after that as her lips curved in a bewitching and seductive arc. Oh, so that's how it is. Amusing, how truly amusing. A goddess whose wings have been clipped. How can she tolerate seeing other people parade around with their wings beautiful and unbroken? What is Master talking about? Yuwu cautiously sent out a sound transmission. I don't know. Chanyi shook her head. It's probably about the fact that Yun Kaining's profound strength was crippled before. So Master must have been prodding at the dark shadow that this event left in her heart. Ah, Yuwu grew even more confused. Kai Yinger's heart suddenly tightened as she lightly clenched her white teeth. She did not say anything, but the gaze she directed at Chi Wuyao now carried a dangerous coldness. Tell all 9 of them to follow me, Yun Chi suddenly said. Chi Wuyao and Kai Yinger's silent duel was forcefully interrupted by those words. Chi Wuyao turned toward Yun Chi, her lips slightly parted. She twisted her face into an exaggerated look of shock and astonishment. It can't be that you're truly going to help all of them. Raise their cultivation, are you? If you take all 9 of them at once, aren't you afraid that you won't be able to last? Yun Chi glared at her as he said, I do have a method to help them grow quickly, but it isn't here or now. Oh, shock appeared in Chi Wuyao's eyes as her gaze turned thoughtful. Aren't you very interested in calamity and misfortune? Yun Chi started speaking slowly. Every word of his was dark and heavy. So for this very first time, we'll let them be the medium for this darkness. This was not a question. It was a pronouncement. The calamity and misfortune formation, the darkness devil formation that was recorded in the middle part of the eternal calamity of darkness. However, even to this day, Chi still had no confidence in being able to freely control it. As a result, he had never tried to use it on Yinger as he could not guarantee her safety in the process. This was the first time he had decided to use it, and this time he would test it using the bodies of the 9 witches. The heretic god arts boosted the body of its user, allowing its user to instantly break through his limits without any restraint, allowing him to display unfathomable power. Whereas the eternal calamity of darkness was mainly focused on controlling other people, and this included all forms of darkness. As powers on the same level in a world without true gods, they were well and truly heaven-defying powers in their own domains. From Yinger's response, it was clear that even she did not know about the existence of calamity and misfortune. This made it obvious that Chi had never used it on her before. Given Chi Wuyao's cunning and intelligence, how could she not realize that Chi was planning to use the 9 witches, the 9 most important people at her side, to conduct an experiment? However, she did not refuse. Instead, a strange black light flashed in her eyes. Other than Chi, she was the only other person in the world who truly understood what the words calamity and misfortune meant. The miraculous power that had perfected the witch's compatibility with the darkness was only one of the basic powers of the eternal calamity of darkness. However, calamity and misfortune was one of its intermediate powers, so one could well imagine just how powerful it was. "Fine," Chi Wuyao said in a cheery voice. "Since you've shown such interest, how can this queen bear to reject you?" She turned towards her 9 witches and said, "From today onward, Chi's words are the same as this queen's words. All of you must obey him as you would me." When she said those words, everyone, including Chi, was so shocked that they froze in place. Even though she had just uttered that short and simple line, she had undoubtedly handed the control of the entire soul-stealing realm over to Chi. Understanding a person was an extremely difficult thing to do, and trusting a person was something even harder than that. Both Chi, whose life had been ruined by the eternal heaven god emperor, and Yinger, who had been abandoned by the Brahma heaven god emperor, were keenly aware of this point. As for the unfathomable and enigmatic Chi Wuyao, she was always on her guard when it came to dealing with other people. She was the last person they would expect to make a decision that was so bold that it nearly seemed crazy. "Oh, do you have any questions?" Chi Wuyao asked with a faint smile on her face. "No, we will obey Master's command." Jai Xin and Jai Ling were the first to speak. "But what exactly is this calamity and misfortune?" Yili asked, her expression grave and serious. "You'll find out very soon," Chi Wuyao said with a mysterious smile on her face. "The day you can freely control that power is also the day that we will be able to set foot in the burning moon realm and the Yama realm." Chi Wuyao's words instantly dispelled all of the doubts and strange thoughts in the witches' hearts, leaving behind only a resolute determination. Time flowed swiftly, and 100 days passed in the blink of an eye. No one was aware of how the negotiations between Chi Wuyao and Zhou Zuzi went, but in the end, the date that was set was the date that Chi Wuyao had initially chosen, the day that was 100 days later. Her prediction had been so accurate that it sent chills down their spines. Once it passed an hour after midnight, Chi, who had been taking a short rest, opened his eyes. Wild black light shook in his eyes, and it took him several breaths to make it slowly disappear. Today was the day that Chi Wuyao and Zhou Zuzi were going to make their deal. If Wuxin was still alive, today would have been her 18th birthday. "Let's go," Yinger, who was standing by his side, said. Chi rose to his feet and slowly strode forward. A dim, dark energy curled around his feet with every step he took. He pushed the hall doors open and found Chi Wuyao standing there. She had already been there for some time. As she saw the 2 people emerging, she turned her bewitching body around. "Let's go. This queen has been waiting for the upcoming spectacle for far too long. I wonder just how much that Zhou Zuzi has grown over the last 10,000 years." A dark, profound arc that was over 300 meters long and wide descended to the ground. Great Witch Jai Xin and Jai Ling and 7th Witch Hua Jin were already waiting for them in the profound arc. It seemed like they were also accompanying them on this trip. The profound arc took off and flew toward the south. It was an extremely long journey from here to the borders of the northern divine region, but the profound arc was flying at a moderate speed. After all, the one who was truly anxious was Zhou Zuzi. Chi stood at the stern of the profound ark as he coldly surveyed the vast and boundless world of darkness before him. He had not uttered a single word during their journey, and his hands were knotted into tight fists that had not been relaxed even once. Eternal Heaven God Emperor Zhou Zuzi, the person who had destroyed everything that he had, the person who had plunged him into this cruel and pain-filled nightmare. After 3 years, he was finally going to see him again. It was clearly too early. It was clearly not the best opportunity they could take, but he could no longer hold himself back, could no longer control his own emotions. Chi Wuyao was standing on the other side of the profound arc. She was staring at a different but equally vast star region of darkness. Chi Wuyao paused for a moment when she walked over and saw Chi Wuyao. Her golden hair and the belt of her skirt were fluttering slightly in midair. The secular world often used the idiom, as beautiful as a painting, to praise beautiful women, but even the side view of this particular woman could never be captured or described by something so simple. The Brahma monarch goddess was a perfect creation the heavens spent all their energy and creativity on. But today, it had become the private tool of a devil of vengeance. There was probably no one who wouldn't feel saddened by this. Normally, you wouldn't move 3 feet away from him when this queen is around, but today you're standing over 100 feet away from him. What a rare sight, Chi Wuyao mocked lazily. Chi Wuyao snorted coldly in response. His mood is at its worst every year today. I can't be bothered to provoke him at this time. She shot Chi Wuyao a sideways glance. It doesn't look like you're worried that this operation of yours will fail. Our opponent is the eternal heaven god emperor, isn't it? This queen never underestimates her opponent. Chi Wuyao smiled. Herself even less so. Plus, the eternal heaven god emperor is the reason I'm this confident. You're talking about his bargaining chip. That's right. Chi Wuyao stroked a hand down her hair, and the black fog that covered her face permanently thinned just enough to reveal the outline of a dreamy countenance. In his opinion, his bargaining chip is something neither this queen nor anyone else could ever turn down. To be honest, this queen is still surprised that he would give away something this valuable. Chi Wuyao sneered. Heh, excluding the matter of Zhou Qingchen, he's breaking a terrible taboo just by visiting the northern divine region to deal with you. He has every reason to want this deal to succeed the first time, so I'm not going to be surprised no matter what he offers. Chi Wuyao looked at her and let out an exclamation of surprise. You're not going to ask me what he offered me. If you want to talk about it, then talk. Chi Wuyao said expressionlessly without looking at the Devil Queen. There was no way she was going to play Chi Wuyao's game. The Devil Queen's lips curled into a smile. Ayah, what a disobedient child. If you want an obedient child to play with, you should seek out your boy toy, Chi Wuyao taunted. Boy toy. Hey he, Chi Wuyao burst into a giggle. Back when the clear sky god realm was still around, most of its power was inherited by men. But during my reign, all of its inheritors are women. Moreover, do you know what this queen values the most when selecting her witches? Their looks, to me, it weighs more than any talent or background. Chi Wuyao. Every one of my witches' beauty is 1 in a billion. From Jai Xin to Chanyi, the first all the way to the 9th, all of them had to go through a painstaking selection process. Not even the burning moon god emperor's favorite concubine can hold a candle to my witches. Can you guess the reason I went through all this? A wave of discomfort suddenly came over Chi Wuyao. Frowning unconsciously, she asked, What are you trying to say? What this queen is trying to say is... Chi Wuyao suddenly sounded a lot closer, so Chi Wuyao subconsciously glanced sideways to see what the former was doing. She was shocked to discover that the Devil Queen's face was mere inches away from hers, so close that she could even feel her warm breath brushing against her lips. There seemed to be stars shooting across the pupils behind the black fog. If you ever get tired of men, you may find women more to your liking one day. Chi Wuyao jumped back a step and watched Chi Wuyao with apprehension. Every bone in her body was melting against her will. Ha 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 ha, Chi Wuyao laughed loudly as she turned away. The next person she went to meet was Chi. A storm of darkness blew persistently against his body, but Chi's mind remained as calm as a pool of dead water. He didn't turn around when he sensed Chi Wuyao approaching him from behind. What is the anomaly I sense in your soul? He asked suddenly. Chi Wuyao stopped only when she was standing shoulder to shoulder with Chi. Parting her lips slightly in a coquettish manner, she said, This queen is honestly surprised you managed to keep yourself from asking for this long. They were incredibly close to each other, so the devilish voice reached all the way to the core of his soul. Had he been another man, had he been his old self, he doubted he would be able to remain standing. "Will you answer the question or not?" Xianxia asked coldly. "If it's your question, then sure I will." Chi Wuyao smiled cutely at him. Now that she was alone with Xianxia, she acted more like a succubus than the devil queen. "Xianxia, you have probably figured it out yourself. After all, you're the only one who have the power to detect it," Chi Wuyao said. "As you suspect, I have a certain soul inside of me, but unlike you, I was not so lucky as to obtain a whole soul. It's so small you almost can't see it. A long time ago, this soul belonged to the Nirvana Devil Emperor." Xianxia frowned visibly at the reveal. "I thought so." The Nirvana Devil Emperor was one of the 4 ancient Devil Emperors. They were at the same level as the Heaven-Smiting Devil Emperor. Back at Soul's Sky, when Chi Wuyao had addressed the 3 Yama devils personally, her soul aura had actually caused a bit of fear in his dragon god soul. The primordial azure dragon was the emperor of dragons. Back in those days, it was a class above almost any true god. Therefore, the soul that could strike fear in the soul of the dragon god had to be a class above its own. It had to be a creation god's soul or a devil emperor's soul. Due to Chi Wuyao's own admission, he now knew that she possessed a sliver of a devil emperor's soul. Who would have thought that there were other relics of the past besides the heaven-smiting devil emperor that survived to this day? It might be just the wisp of a soul, but it was still the power of a devil emperor. No wonder she was able to climb all the way to the impossible top despite being a common woman at the start. No wonder she was able to leave a lasting shadow in Kai and I Fanchon, and Zhou Zuzi's hearts even though it had been tens of thousands of years since they clashed against one another. It might even be the source of her terrifying insight and intelligence. "You are the only one who knows this besides myself." Chi Wuyao smiled lightly. "You are the only one in this world I cannot look down on from above. In fact, what I possess is almost worthless compared to yours. It would be foolish to try to hide this from you." "HMPH. There's no one in the world who has the right to look down on a devil emperor's soul," Xianxia said. But Chi Wuyao shook her head and said quietly, "What you have inherited is the creation god's power, the heretic god's profound veins, the devil emperor's power, and the heaven-smiting devil emperor's origin blood. You have even cultivated their unique profound arts. But the devil emperor's soul in me is as small as a grain of sand. Not only is it completely incomparable to what you got, the most it can do," she looked at Xianxia strangely, "is to play a trick or two once in a while. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been trapped in this prison." Xianxia suddenly looked at her with a cold expression. "How did you hear about the heretic god's profound veins?" At the edge of the primal chaos, he had revealed his secret in front of everyone to appease the heaven-smiting devil emperor. However, he only said that he had the heretic god's origin power. He never revealed the fact that he had the heretic god's profound veins. Muke Shunian had warned him more than once to keep the heretic god's profound veins a secret even if he had no choice, but to reveal his power one day. Origin power, especially a creation god's origin power, seemed impossible to rob, so it wasn't the worst thing in the world to reveal it. But a complete set of profound veins was a different story. Even if it was impossible to take them away from Xianxia, some would be willing to try anyway. Besides his close friends and family, he never revealed the fact that he had the heretic god's profound veins to anyone in the eastern divine region. That was why he could hardly believe his ears when Chi Wuyao spoke like it was an open secret. Chi Wuyao was actually caught off guard for a second. Then she parted her lips slightly and whispered, "Everyone likes to know a secret, and secrets are a woman's greatest asset. Why don't you take a guess and see if I would be willing to part with one of mine for you? Just so you know, the same rule applies to men as well." Rip. An air current suddenly cut apart the space between Chi Wuyao and Xianxia. It also cut off the connection between their eyes completely. Kai and I Yinger had appeared between the duo like a ghost to glare at Chi Wuyao frigidly. "If you like to reveal your secrets so much, you can make your women beg for it to your heart's content. But Xianxia and I are not interested in playing your games." Chi Wuyao withdrew her gaze and looked away with a sorrowful expression. She sighed. "That's true. It's been several months since you've come to the sacred region, but neither of you tried to catch a glimpse of my true appearance even once. Your heartlessness is saddening indeed." "Heh," Kai and I Yinger sneered at her. "Chi Wuyao, feel free to play your cheap tricks on those lowly men all you want, but don't think for a second that it will work on Xianxia. You will only bring shame to yourself. Also, don't say I didn't warn you." Kai and I Yinger's gaze and voice turned even colder. "But since the first day of our cooperation, we already told you not to entertain any foolish thoughts. You won't want enemies like Chi and I." With her back facing Kai and Yinger, an enigmatic smile crossed Chi Wuyao's lips. "What a sensitive girl. You are positively growing on me, Kai and Yinger." The darkness profound arc started slowing down at this moment. Hua-jin landed soundlessly next to her master and said, "Master, we'll be arriving in another hour. Would you like Hua-jin to scout ahead?" "It's fine," Chi Wuyao said. "Our friend is the one who should worry about this meeting going awry, not us." "Okay, Hua-jin understands." The witch disappeared and the darkness profound arc returned to its normal speed. They were rapidly approaching the border of the northern divine region. Not once did Chi Wuyao worry over the fact that her movement might be seen by others at all. "We are 1 hour away from our destination." Chi Wuyao turned around to look at Chi and Kai and Yinger. "Do you want me to capture you personally, or do you want to do it yourself?" Chi turned away and punched himself in the solar plexus right after she was finished speaking. Bang! The entire ship was shuddering from the impact. Wounds and blood spread across Chi's body wantonly like tree roots, drenching half his black clothes in just the blink of an eye. He was bleeding from all orifices, and blood was positively gushing out of the corner of his lips. Kai and Yinger took half a step forward before she forced herself to stop. A flash of darkness later, the blood turned dry and dark. It looked like it was several years old at least. "You didn't need to go this far." Chi Wuyao looked away. "It's highly unlikely that Zhou Zuzi would take anyone with him besides Zhou Qingchen. At most, he will bring his greatest guardian, Tai Yu. If he came alone, then all the better. This is why this queen brought Jai Xin and Jai Ling today. Although there's nothing we can do to Zhou Zuzi and Taiyu, brute forcing our way through and killing Zhou Qingchen shouldn't be a problem at all. Are you sure you want to do this yourself?" Chi didn't give her a reply. He walked past Chi Wuyao and stood at the forefront of the profound arc, hateful droplets of blood dripping through his clenched fists nonstop. Kai and Yinger walked next to Chi Wuyao and taunted her. "I didn't think you would ask something that stupid, and you call yourself the Devil Queen." Chi Wuyao smiled back. "Plenty of men like intelligent women, but no one likes a woman who's too intelligent for her own good. Acting foolish once in a while makes it easier to win a man's heart. What do you think?" "Heh, so this is how the Northern Devil Queen slept her way to the top. Very enlightening. But I can understand why it worked for you. After all, the men of the Northern Divine Region are a bunch of trash who are satisfied with being trapped in a prison." Kai and Yinger retorted curtly and mercilessly before turning away, but for some reason, she couldn't forget what Chi Wuyao had just said. Region. This place was the closest region of darkness in the Northern Divine Region to the Eastern Divine Region. Because it was so close to the Eastern Divine Region, the aura of darkness in this place was exceptionally thin. There were no devil people within a full 500 kilometers of this area, and even devil beasts were an exceedingly rare sight. On the other side of the border, the closest star region to the Northern Divine Region was the star region where the Snow Song Realm lay. Zhou Zuzi was standing outside the border of the Northern Divine Region and peered into the land of darkness that was just within reach. Zhou Qingchen was standing beside him, and he wore a bleak and gloomy expression on his face. The hope of his salvation seemed to be at hand, but he did not seem too excited or nervous about the whole thing. Of course, in the eyes of Zhou Zuzi and Honorable Tai Yu, this was undoubtedly due to the influence of darkness on Zhou Qingchen's mind. 10 millennia ago, Zhou Zuzi and Kainai Fanshan had taken Chi Wuyao's bait and chased her into this land of darkness. It created such a huge commotion that it accidentally drew in Snow Song Realm King Mukshunian, who had just entered the Divine Master Realm. At that time, he had stepped into darkness to chase after the Devil Queen, so even if the world knew, he had nothing to hide. But today, "My lord, let us act," Honorable Tai Yu said. "I will stay behind and guard this area. I won't let anyone draw near to this place or detect anything. If anything happens on the other side, I will immediately rush over. You don't need to worry." Zhou Zuzi and Tai Yu. One was the Eternal Heaven God Emperor, and the other was the leader of the Eternal Heaven Guardians. The two most important people in the Eternal Heaven God realm were preparing to conduct the most taboo of transactions, and they were painstakingly hiding it from the rest of the world. Tai Yu took a deep look at Zhou Qingchen before he gave a soft sigh and sent him a sound transmission. "Qingchen, your father betrayed his principles for the sake of his beliefs once before by betraying his promise to Chi. The guilt and the pain he felt from doing such a thing nearly destroyed him. But today, he is even willing to cast aside his beliefs for a short while, just to save you. If you do get saved, You must definitely become the greatest and most magnanimous eternal heaven god emperor in the future. That is the only way you will be able to live up to your father's sacrifice and painstaking effort to save you. Zhou Qingchen lifted his head and shut his eyes, his body gently trembling. In Tai Yu's eyes, Zhou Qingchen was having a hard time controlling his emotions because he had been moved by his father's sacrifice. However, he was unaware that the thoughts reverberating in Zhou Qingchen's heart were the exact opposite of what he believed them to be. If everything had been wrong from the start, if their beliefs and convictions had been distorted in the first place, who was the true savior of the world? Who was the one who had truly done a wicked thing, who had truly created this entire mess? Who was the one who truly could not be forgiven? Why did you let me see the darkness so clearly? Why couldn't you have allowed me to continue to be blinded by the light, allowed me to remain ignorant and delusional? Yun Qi, you've succeeded in taking your revenge. You did not kill me, but you made me so deeply regret the way I have lived, made me so deeply regret that I am actually the eternal heaven god emperor's son. To think that the halo of light I used to look up to, and the glory that I used to take pride in, were actually things that were completely mired and twisted up in a million years of sin and filth. How ridiculous all of this is. Qingchen, let us be off. When he looked at Zhou Qingchen, the dark haze that covered Zhou Zuzi's face disappeared. He gave him a warm and gentle smile as he said, "Don't worry, if I didn't have enough confidence, your father would not bring you to this place. Once this day has passed, everything will be over." "Amen." Zhou Qingchen nodded his head. After that, he followed after Zhou Zuzi and walked toward the land of darkness in front of him. The darkness profound arc finally came to a halt. Yun Qi was the first to get off the profound arc, but he did not take any independent action. Instead, he quietly stood where he had landed as he stared straight into the darkness in front of him. He remained motionless for a long period of time. Given the deliberately slow speed that Chi Wuyao had been traveling at, Zhou Zuzi had definitely arrived long ago. He was somewhere in front of them, just outside of the range of his spiritual perception. "Hua Jin," Chi Wuyao called. Hua Jin gave a gentle nod of her head. Her willowy body whirled lightly in the air as she silently disappeared into the darkness without leaving behind a single trace. "Jai Xin, Jai Ling, you only have one mission. Everything else that happens is none of your concern. Do you understand?" Chi Wuyao very rarely repeated her orders, but this time she had repeated herself to emphasize her point. Two pairs of beautiful eyes unconsciously flitted in Yun Qi's direction. But after that, they gravely nodded their heads before flying off in two different directions and disappeared into the darkness as well. The darkness profound arc was not stored away, but instead left hovering where it was. Kai Yinger was just about to get off the profound arc when Chi Wuyao suddenly appeared in front of her and blocked her way. "Yun Kainying, you should stay here." "The reason?" Kai Yinger asked icily instead of exploding in rage. Chi Wuyao replied, "It isn't convenient for you to participate in this event because your very presence will very likely reveal a flaw in our plan. Allowing you to follow us here is the very furthest I can go." "Me? A flaw?" Kai Yinger looked like she had just heard a huge joke as her gaze instantly grew cold and dark. "Chi Wuyao, let me warn you one last time. Don't try to taunt or provoke me again, because it will be too late once I lose my patience. Even kneeling before me will be useless." Chi Wuyao did not seem the least bit angry. She started to slowly move forward as she looked into Kai Yinger's frigid eyes, her towering bosom very nearly brushing against Kai Yinger's own. "Of course, the one who used to be the Brahma monarch goddess will not cause us any worry, because once she is locked onto a target, she will use all of her cunning and every method available to her to obtain it. She won't allow anything to distract her from it, especially such a thing as emotion." "But is the current Yun Kainying still the Brahma monarch goddess she was in the past?" Chi Wuyao's fragrant breath gently brushed against Kai Yinger's lips and face. However, Kai Yinger did not back down this time. Her eyes grew even colder as she said, "What sort of joke are you trying to tell right now? Of course you don't understand. Because if you truly did understand, you wouldn't have become like this." Chi Wuyao gave a dry chuckle. "After all, you are the Brahma monarch goddess in every other aspect. But in a certain aspect, you are a little chick who can't even compare to an ordinary woman." Kai Yinger said, I hope that you'll think through these two things properly," Chi Wuyao continued. "The first thing is something that you've mentioned time and again. That vengeance was the reason you were willing to stain yourself with darkness, and it was everything to you. Perhaps it really was that way at first. But if you think back carefully, is the thing that has occupied your heart and mind the most during this period of time still vengeance? Kai Yinger's eyes suddenly froze. The second thing is this. As long as it concerns a certain subject, you will speak without any thought or prudence, and you will lose your cool and all sense of propriety. This is also why this queen is forbidding you from following us, because Yun Chi regards this matter with far too much importance and desire. If it isn't perfect, or if it's ruined somehow, it would be such a pity. Kai Yinger stood rooted in place. She was not able to utter a single retort. Her golden eyes looked like shattered stars beneath her mask as they shook wildly. Chi Wuyao turned around and said, "Of course, if you insist on going, this queen won't be able to stop you either." Her steps were light and graceful as she slowly walked away from Kai Yinger. Kai Yinger did not chase after them. She did not take a single step forward, not even after Chi Wuyao and Yun Chi's figures had disappeared into the distant darkness. She was the only figure left in this empty and vacant world of darkness. This was the first time Yun Chi had completely disappeared from all of her senses since they had met in the northern region, and her soul suddenly felt empty. Zhou Zuzi had waited a whole 6 hours. However, he had not grown anxious or tried to venture any deeper into the darkness. The northern divine region had been pressed into a small and pathetic cage by the other 3 divine regions. So now that Chi Wuyao had finally gotten this opportunity that she could only dream of, as the devil queen of the northern region, how could she let such an opportunity to vent her anger go to waste? Finally, Zhou Zuzi started to move again as he raised his head and stretched out an arm. The boundless power of a god-emperor surged up out of it and engulfed Zhou Qingchen, forming a barrier around him that could repel 10,000 mountains. He withdrew his arm after the barrier had been formed, but a thread of energy tethered the two of them together if it was anyone other than him. They would not be able to think of reason for why Chi Wuyao would suddenly try to kill Zhou Qingchen. After all, to Chi Wuyao, this bargaining chip should be 1,000,000,000 times more valuable than killing his son to show off her strength and vent some anger. Unless she had gone mad. However, he would not be caught unprepared. Chi Wuyao sauntered toward him from inside a dense black fog. After she arrived, the already sinister and gloomy land of darkness grew even more oppressive. Zhou Zuzi felt as if the dusky sky was being pressed down, and the atmosphere turned so stifling that he could barely feel his heart beat in his chest. Gray light was reflected in Zhou Zuzi's eye, and the woman in front of him was bathed in a thin layer of black mist. However, neither his eyes or his spiritual perception could pierce that mist. Even though her figure was hazy and her face was hidden, Zhou Zuzi had been convinced that she was the northern region's devil queen from the very first moment she appeared, because he would never ever forget this darkness aura, not even to the day he died. However, his gaze immediately swiveled to the figure following along behind Chi Wuyao. Upon seeing this person, his pupils contracted slightly. Yun Chi, Zhou Qingchen finally lifted his head up as well. Yun Chi's figure slowly strode out of the black fog. He was dressed in tattered black clothes and his hair was wild and disheveled. Blood covered his body, a body encased in a layer of black mist. This definitely was not his own power. It was clearly a darkness power that had originated from the Devil Queen. His steps were plodding and heavy as he trudged through the black fog, but his body looked as hard as strong steel. His eyes were clearly a little blurry and unfocused, but they still radiated a devilish malice. The moment he saw Zhou Zuzi, Yun Chi's entire body went stiff. His eyes glowed with the blood-red light of hatred as he snarled, "Old dog, eternal, heaven!" Every word contained a bone-piercing hatred, filled with broken teeth and blood. He staggered a single step forward before he charged toward Zhou Zuzi like a lunatic. He looked like an evil spirit whose soul had been pierced by thousands of blades. Chi Wuyao lightly tapped the air, causing the black mist to bear down on Yun Chi and violently press him against the ground. All of his limbs violently spasmed in the air, but he was unable to stand up. The only thing he could do was let out hoarse roars of pain. His rage, his hatred, his wounds, his blood, and the look in his eyes, all of it was real. His profound strength and soul power had indeed been completely suppressed and sealed away by Chi Wuyao. However, he could escape from this suppression at any time. Chi Wuyao did not even spare Yun Chi a single glance as she spoke in a languid and indolent manner. "Eternal Heaven God Emperor, it's been 10,000 years. To think that you've grown so old. If this queen had known that this would happen, I would not have wasted so much effort all those years ago. In a few more years, I will have outlasted you." "Heh heh." Someone far better than this old one will take my place long before my life withers away, so I'm afraid that the Devil Queen's wishes will be hard to fulfill." Zhou Yuzi said those words with a faint smile on his face. His hair and beard fluttered slightly in the wind, giving him the air of a true immortal. "Is this your youngest son?" Chi Wuyao's gaze fell on Zhou Qingchen. She allowed it to linger on him as her voice suddenly became soft and cottony. "He's truly such a handsome child. Since he shares such a destiny with my devil race, why don't you let this queen keep him? I'll let him be my eternal heaven child, and the relations between both of our realms will be repaired. Wouldn't that be perfect?" Zhou Qingchen's entire body went limp as his eyes instantly turned colorless. A trickle of drool dribbled down the corner of his lips. Buzz, Zhou Qingchen felt as if millions of bells had exploded in his head as his body swayed and his eyes regained their focus. However, his entire body was already matted in cold sweat. Zhou Yuzi pressed a palm against his chest, pushing Zhou Qingchen behind him. His voice grew deeper as he said, "Devil Queen, both you and I want something. If our deal falls through, this old one guarantees that you will never be given another chance like this." "Ayah!" Chi Wuyao gave a soft cry of affected displeasure as she withdrew her soul power. She smiled cheerily and said, "This queen only decided to play a tiny joke after seeing how handsome this child was. As a god emperor, there's no need for you to be so petty. However," she took a single step forward, "this queen never imagined that you'd come by yourself. Oh, but it's no wonder the distinguished successor to the throne of the eternal heaven has actually become a devil person. And you, the grand and distinguished eternal heaven god emperor, actually came all the way to this dark land to beg this queen. If any of this ever got out, it would shock all of the holy men in the three divine regions so badly that their eyes would pop out. It would be such shocking news that the entire world would laugh until their jaws dropped off. So how could you possibly assemble a large task force for this? Ha 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 ha." He knew that the Devil Queen would definitely ridicule him, so Zhou Yuzi remained unmoved. He said, "Devil Queen, you really do think highly of this old one. You've even brought 2 other witches along with you this time. The 2 great witches who are said to be the most powerful of them all." His old eyes briefly flickered. "It looks like the Devil Queen is not as calm as she seems when it comes to the object in this old one's hands." "Emperor, as expected, my children couldn't hide themselves from you." Chi Wuyao wasn't surprised that Zhou Yuzi would notice Jai Xin and Jai Ling. They were only a few steps away, and they weren't trying to conceal themselves. But she was a little surprised by how quickly he had discovered them. After Jai Xin and Jai Ling's compatibility with darkness profound energy was improved, their power had become much greater than before. For starters, they were now much better at concealing themselves, not to mention that they were currently in an environment of darkness. If this queen didn't care to conceal her tracks and prevent others from stealing a share of her pie, she would have moved half of the soul-stealing realm over before meeting you. After all, you are the holiest person of the 3 divine regions, and this queen is the wicked monarch of devil people. It took all the energy in me just to keep myself calm and not suffer a heart attack." Zhou Yuzi didn't look bothered by Chi Wuyao's taunts at all. His expression looked as stiff as it was imposing. "You know I wouldn't be able to share this with you alone if the Burning Moon God Emperor or the Yama Emperor shows up, so why must you wag your tongue like this? Is one moment of pleasure really that important to you?" He was speaking to Chi Wuyao, but his gaze kept being attracted to the young man beside Chi Wuyao's feet like a magnet. Yunqi hadn't stopped struggling since the beginning of the meeting, and every time the young man looked up and met his eyes, he looked like he couldn't wait to split into 1,000,000 blades of blood and cut his body into 1,000,000 pieces. "All right." Chi Wuyao withdrew her smile as if she accepted the eternal heaven god emperor's admonishment. A pressure belonging to god emperors alone dyed her words as she asked, "This queen has brought the person you're looking for. Have you brought mine?" Zhou Yuzi extended an arm solemn and opened his palm. A purple light immediately appeared before everyone's eyes. The purple light wasn't particularly strong or blinding, but it was purer than even the most brilliant stars. Its glow even penetrated the thick darkness around it and dyed the distant space in faint purple. Mixed within the purple light was a great, ancient aura that seemed capable of accommodating the entire world in itself. It was primordial energy. Had Kayana Yinger been here, she would have been shocked. It was because Zhou Yuzi had brought an untamed divine marrow with him. According to the records of the Eastern Divine Region, the untamed divine marrow was a sacred object that had gone extinct a long time ago. She was already pretty shocked when she discovered that the northern divine region had an untamed divine marrow. It took a lot to shock the Brahma monarch goddess. Naturally, no one in the entire eastern divine region, in all three divine regions, knew that the eternal heaven god realm was hiding such a thing. In retrospect, it probably wasn't that surprising. Of course, the eternal heaven god realm would do their utmost to keep this a secret from everyone. Transfixed by the purple light, Chi Wuyao didn't look away from the untamed divine marrow for quite some time. Her greed and excitement were palpable even through the black fog that was covering her face. So beautiful, even the prettiest darkness seems dull before its light. Chi Wuyao sighed with emotion. She was still staring at the untamed divine marrow, as if her gaze had melted into the sacred object. She didn't want to be separated from it for even a moment. Suddenly, the purple light winked out of existence. The untamed divine marrow had somehow vanished from Zhou Yuzi's hands. There was nothing more tempting than a bait so close one could almost feel its breath on their skin, and Zhou Yuzi knew this better than anyone. 10 months ago, when he sent Tai Yin and Zhu Liu to slip into the god realm of absolute beginning, affording them even the great void cauldron to maximize their chance of success. It was to steal the divine fruit of absolute beginning from the dragons of absolute beginning, and fuse it with the untamed divine marrow he hid from the entire world. He was hoping to recreate the mythical untamed world pellet again. There was truly nothing he wouldn't spend on Zhou Qingchen. But not only did Tai Yin and Zhu Liu fail to retrieve the divine fruit of absolute beginning, they had lost their lives and the great void cauldron as well. According to Honorable Kui, both items had likely fallen into Yun Qi's hands, meaning that the untamed divine marrow had mostly lost its worth. But not today. Today, it was the best bargaining chip he had to save Zhou Qingchen. There was no one in the world who could resist the untamed divine marrow. No one, especially since it might be the last one in the entire primal chaos. You told me that Yun Qi has the power to eliminate the dark energy inside my son, Zhou Yuzi said. He would never have taken such a huge risk and come here otherwise. I hope you're not playing a trick on me. Eternal Heaven God Emperor, haven't you had a personal taste of my soul-stealing powers many years ago? Are you looking down on me? Chi Wuyao suddenly grabbed Yun Qi's head and sent a terrifying amount of black energy into his body. The latter's struggles and screams ceased instantly. Chi Wuyao lifted Yun Qi into the air like a doll. He slowly straightened himself, but his arms were hanging limply on his sides. The black energy covering his head earlier was dissipating quickly, but his eyes were missing their pupils and usual light. Yun Qi, tell me, Chi Wuyao asked, who deserves to die more than anyone else in this world? Yun Qi answered stiffly and robotically, Old Dog Eternal, Heaven. Zhou Yuzi's expression didn't change, but he withdrew his fingers slightly. Are you the one who changed Zhou Qingchen into a devil person? Chi Wuyao asked again. Yes, Yun Qi answered. Does that also mean you know how to remove it and return him to normal? Yes. Yun Qi's answer was hoarse and robotic, but it was the answer Zhou Yuzi wanted to hear even in his dreams. Surprisingly, Zhou Qingchen, the victim who should be more excited about this than anyone, barely reacted to the revelation at all, as if he hadn't woken up from the Devil Queen's bewitching words yet. The last of his doubts gone, Zhou Yuzi relaxed as if 1,000,000,000 tons were removed from his shoulders. Every pore on his body was shivering with joy. The Devil Queen's aura covered every inch of Yun Qi's body, so he had no doubt that the young man was currently under the effects of her soul-stealing technique, meaning that everything he said during the duration of the spell could only be the truth. He and Heaven-Defying had fought Chi Wuyao together tens of thousands of years ago. Scary, didn't even begin to describe how terrible her power was. Everyone knew that Yun Qi had a powerful dragon soul, but he was still affected by Yinger's Brahma soul death-wishing mark until Shenzai removed it. Moreover, Heaven-Defying himself said that Chi Wuyao's soul power was far greater than his, and it was strange in a way that was impossible to comprehend. Not even the clear sky god emperor was able to escape a sudden death tens of thousands of years ago. It was far too easy for this devil queen to control someone at Yun Qi's level. So, is this clear enough for you? Chi Wuyao asked. Right now, Yun Qi was definitely being controlled by Chi Wuyao's power. It was not an act. It would be impossible to fool someone at Zhou Yuzi's level otherwise. However, that didn't mean that Chi Wuyao had all the power. 99% of Yun Qi's soul was stolen by Chi Wuyao, but there was still 1% that belonged to him and him alone. In fact, 1% was all he needed to break the spell if he wished, because he had the eternal calamity of darkness. The eternal calamity of darkness could control any body of darkness. Naturally, that included dark, devilish souls as well. Since it was a power that exceeded even the recognition of true gods, it was impossible for Zhou Yuzi to see through this. The untamed divine marrow appeared in Zhou Yuzi's hand again, dyeing the darkness in mysterious purple once more. Zhou Yuzi said solemnly, "Order Xianxia to remove the darkness inhabiting my son's body. I will give you the last untamed divine marrow in the world once the process is complete." Chi Wuyao narrowed her eyes before giggling seductively. "Do you think I'm a naive 3-year-old eternal heaven god emperor? Will you really give me the untamed divine marrow if after your son is cured?" The eternal heaven god emperor declared with unquestionable solemnity. "This old one is the eternal heaven god emperor, and my word will be as solid as a mandate of heaven. With the heavens as my witness, I swear never to go back on my promise even if you are the northern region devil queen herself." It wasn't a boastful claim. In the 3 divine regions, no one would question the eternal heaven god emperor's ability to hold a promise. But Chi Wuyao suddenly guffawed, not the giggle or chuckle she usually employed, but the uncontrollable laughter when someone heard a funny joke, loudly. "Your word is as solid as a mandate of heaven? Ha 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 ha. Eternal heaven god emperor, are you sure you're still trustworthy? Look behind me, look at him, and tell me again how trustworthy you are." Zhou Yuzi's act of righteousness, composure, and pride shattered into a million pieces the moment he heard this. He couldn't say a thing for a very long time. Xianxia fell into Chi Wuyao's hands. She would have figured out all of his secrets, and him breaking his promise to Xianxia had to be his deepest and most hateful memory of them all. There was no way Chi Wuyao would miss this. His reputation as the most moral god emperor in the world, the praise that his promise was worth its weight in heaven, was nothing but a joke in front of Chi Wuyao. "What's wrong? Cat got your tongue?" Chi Wuyao sneered at him before continuing. "Xianxia saved all of you back then, and I'm not just talking about your lives. Without him, you would have lost even the roots beneath your feet. But the moment he revealed his darkness profound energy, you immediately turned against him and pretended as if he had never saved your sorry hides. I bet you clamped down on the news of him saving the world tighter than your own fly, haven't you? That's not all. You are the one who encouraged the 3 divine regions into hunting him all over the world, and you are the reason not even a speck of his home planet was left." The eternal heaven god emperor's face changed again and again, but he wasn't surprised. Chi Wuyao had Xianxia's soul, so it was only natural that she would know this much. Your son is also a bearer of darkness profound energy. But instead of killing him and cleansing the world of his filth like the devil-hating saint you are, you hid the truth like your life depends on it, ran all the way to the northern divine region, and brought the one and only untamed divine marrow the eastern divine region has to me to make a deal. Me, an emperor of devils, Aya. On one hand, we have a literal messiah who not only saved your lives, but the very fate of the god realm itself. On the other, we have vermin who consumed countless resources and contributed nothing to the world. But this discrimination, are you sure you didn't make a mistake? Maybe you've gotten them mixed up or something. You couldn't have, though, because one of them is your son. Ha 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 ha. Eternal heaven god emperor, to call you a shameless hypocrite would be too kind. And you want me to believe your so-called word? The eastern divine region must be a horrible place if they would worship a loathsome god emperor like you as their saint. Zhou Yuzi knew that Chi Wuyao was trying to drive him into a disadvantageous corner, but her words still pierced through his heart like needles. It took several mouthfuls of air before he finally calmed down a bit. "What do you want, devil queen?" He didn't want to bother with that. He didn't even want to defend himself. All he wanted was to never hear a single word about that again. "Oh, it's very simple," Chi Wuyao said. "This may be the northern divine region, but this queen shan't take advantage of you. We'll both put the items into our respective barriers. Then, we'll merge the barriers together. Finally, we'll withdraw our energy at the same time and claim what we desire. This way, the barrier will hold even if one of us is scheming something and accidentally withdraws their power later than expected. No one will get what they want unless we unlock the barrier together. It is a fair exchange, don't you think?" No. Zhou Yuzi rejected her suggestion immediately. The untamed divine marrow is an inanimate object, but not Xianxia. Once the untamed divine marrow enters your possession, it is yours and yours alone. But if Xianxia enters my possession, he would still be affected by your spell. You must be joking. Chi Wuyao sneered faintly. If I release my spell now, do you think Xianxia will save your son? He would rather die 1,000,000 times first. But if you didn't give the order, my son wouldn't be saved, and this old one would still lose the untamed divine marrow. This is not fair, Zhou Yuzi said. You can distrust me, but there's no reason for this old one to trust you either. Then we can wait. I can do this all day. Chi Wuyao wasn't worried in the slightest. Turning around to face Xianxia, she curled her lips slightly and touched his face with her fingertips. Then she started caressing him flirtatiously. Such a good boy, she said in a melting, loving voice. If I can extract his heretic god origin power for myself, this queen wouldn't mind losing even 1,000,000 untamed divine marrows. In fact, this queen is quite worried that that old man over there would hurt you or even kill you once I gave you to him. It would be a most pitiful outcome, don't you think? She exhaled quietly as her voice grew softer and slower. She then moved closer to Xianxia, parted her lips, revealed her pearly teeth and pink tongue, and licked him on the neck. Of course, Xianxia, whose soul had been seized, did not make any response. Zhou Yuzi's eyebrows violently twitched. He had long heard that the northern region's devil queen was so beautiful and alluring she seemed like a succubus in the flesh. Her bewitching seductiveness seemed ingrained in her very bones, and her ability to manipulate men was unrivaled under the heavens. However, he was still left completely flustered when he witnessed this scene. If she dared to behave in such a flagrant manner towards a junior whose soul she had seized in public, then one could well imagine just how debauched her behavior normally was. It was this shallow and simple action of hers which made the mouth of the eternal heaven god emperor, who had been buffeted by thousands of life storms, go dry. He started to feel a burning sensation that had died out long ago rise up in his body. But this feeling soon turned intense as it swiftly spread throughout his body, dyeing it in an abnormal blush. His heart was violently shaken, but at the same time, to his incredulous shock, a burning lust had been birthed inside of it. It was the sort of lust that a person wanted to simply sink into, a lust which made you want to abandon everything and drown in its pleasures forever. Bzzz? Zhou Yuzi fiercely bit down on his tongue as profound energy circulated throughout his entire body and swiftly suppressed that terrifying agitation. His expression did not change at all, and his voice remained low and imperious. Devil Queen, a mere bewitching technique like that isn't enough to shake this old one's heart. There's no need for you to waste any energy. The longer we drag this out, the more likely it is for something unforeseen to happen. You've made such a long journey here, so I don't think you want to return empty-handed, right? Chi Wuyao seemed to pay no mind to his words, and her gaze no longer flickered towards the untamed divine marrow in Zhou Yuzi's hands. Oh my, are you starting to feel anxious? It is of no matter, this queen has lots of time. Even if I return home empty-handed, I'll just take it that I went out for a breath of fresh air. It's not like I'm losing anything. She calmly turned her head and looked towards the blank-faced Xianxia. Her voice grew softer and gentler as she said, "Isn't that right, my good chair?" The eternal heaven god emperor's brow deeply furrowed, but he did not say anything. The moment he had taken out the untamed divine marrow, he had clearly sensed Chi Wuyao's rapacious greed ooze out of her. He had suffered a complete loss in their duel of words and the pressure exerted by their soul. Many things had changed over the last 10 millennia. He had grown old while the Devil Queen had only grown more terrifying. However, no matter how much of a disadvantage he was at, even if his heart was so anxious that it had burned to cinders, he definitely could not back down here. He was convinced that Chi Wuyao's anxiety was no less than his. Because if this meeting dragged and the other 2 king realms managed to sniff it out, she could forget about keeping this untamed divine marrow for herself. Zhou Yuzi remained silent, while Chi Wuyao did not even spare him a single glance. She had even moved her aura away from his body. Underneath that hazy black mist, her body seemed to be tightly pressed against the enthralled Xianxia's body. There were several female god emperors in the other 3 divine regions. Even the grand ancestor of his eternal heaven god realm was a woman. If he had not witnessed it personally, he would truly find it hard to believe that any woman who had ascended to the seat of God Emperor would actually behave so scandalously in front of other people. Chair, her voice was both gentle and alluring as she called his name. It sounded so seductive that it nearly melted half of Zhou Yuzi's bones in that very instant. Answer this queen. Who was your very first woman? Xianxia moved his lips. Ling-er. Oh ho, Chi Wuyao said as a look of realization flashed across her head. Her smile grew even more seductive. Then who do you think is the most beautiful woman that you've ever come across? Shen, Zai. he replied with the exact same blank and guileless expression when Chi Wuyao asked Chi, whose soul had been seized, these questions. They ignored his will and directly drew those answers out from his soul. "Ayah," Chi Wuyao let out a small but exaggerated cry before she started giggling. "To think that you'd still think of the Dragon Queen, even though you already have the goddess by your side. Ah, how truly greedy you are. At number percent." For a moment, the eternal heaven god emperor found it hard to breathe, and his vision had even started to go black. Every occasion he had ever been a part of in his life was either grand, solemn, or dignified. As long as he was there, no one had ever dared to overstep their bounds or behave in an undignified manner. But this northern region devil queen, her behavior was simply far too frivolous and debauched. This should have been a meeting filled with mutual hostility, where both sides stood across from each other with swords drawn. Yet, she was actually whispering seductively to a person whose soul she had dominated. Such corrupt and scandalous behavior, what frivolous and humiliating behavior. "I heard that your master's name was Mu Xuanian." It was as if Chi Wuyao had completely forgotten about Zhou Zuzi's existence. In fact, she continued to ask Chi those questions in an utterly disgraceful manner. "Did you ever do that?" "That's enough." Zhou Zuzi could not take it any longer. He let out a low roar, and he extended the hand that held the untamed divine marrow. "Devil Queen, hand Chi over to me. Before you give him the order, this old one will even pass the untamed divine marrow to you. This is the last concession I will make." "Concession?" Chi Wuyao finally turned to look at him. "What a great concession. If the eternal heaven god emperor pulls a muscle because of this queen won't be able to answer for it." Zhou Zuzi pushed down his anger as he said, "Even if Chi is in this old one's hands, if you, the devil queen, do not give the command, he will not purge the darkness from my son's body. However, once you have the untamed divine marrow in your hands, you will already have gained the absolute advantage. This old one is not your equal when it comes to a duel of words, but both you and I have come to this place because we want something from each other. Since this old one has already made so many concessions, you should also know when to quit." "The absolute advantage," Chi Wuyao said with a dry chuckle. "Is there anyone in this universe who is unaware that Chi is the one you want to kill the most? If I hand him over to you first, you can kill him with a single strike of your palm. At that point, wouldn't this queen be left with nothing? In fact, this queen even suspects that this whole deal about wanting to save your son is a sham, and that your true goal is to use this excuse to kill Chi." A dark light that no one sensed flashed in the depths of Zhou Zuzi's eyes. His brows heavily sank as he said, "The deal is taking place in your northern region, and you even have your two strongest witches by your side. But this old one has come by himself. If all of you attack me together, it wouldn't be too hard for any of you to kill this old one's son. With such a threat hanging over this old one's head, how would I dare to have any funny ideas?" "Aya," Chi Wuyao cried in a bewitching voice. "Not only is your son handsome, he's even become one of us devils. This queen has truly taken a fancy to him, so how could I bear to kill him?" Just as she finished speaking, the already dim sky turned even darker. Both Chi Wuyao and Zhou Zuzi raised their heads at the same time. This was the southernmost part of the northern divine region, so one could see the blurry figure of a dusky gray moon. When the moon moved into the middle of the sky, it would signify that this day had ended. Chi Wuyao's aura subtly changed, and when she opened her mouth again, her voice had lost all of its previous indolence and seductiveness. It was now shockingly cold and calm. "Forget it. Since it's already this late, this queen no longer has the inclination to drag this out any further." She suddenly pushed her hand out, and Chi, who had been standing beside her, flew toward Zhou Zuzi like a wooden stump. Zhou Zuzi casually waved his arm in the air, and Chi simply floated down gently in front of him. Chi was right in front of him, and his eyes were devoid of light. As he stared at him from such a close distance, Zhou Zuzi started recalling things of the past. He recalled Chi's stubborn pride during the profound God convention, the incredible respect Chi had shown him when they had spoken with each other, the kindness and compassion Chi showed him when he had helped him get rid of the devilish poison, and his eyes, which seemed to contain all of the stars in the universe, as he faced the heaven-smiting devil emperor alone. All of these things seemed to have happened just yesterday, yet everything had drastically changed. After he let out a sigh, Zhou Zuzi unconsciously averted his eyes from Chi's lifeless gaze. As he grabbed Chi's shoulder with one hand, he gently pushed the other one forward. Purple light flashed through the air, and the precious treasure that the eternal heaven god realm had hidden for dozens of millennia. What was very likely the last remaining untamed divine marrow in the entire primal chaos dimension, flew toward the devil queen of the north. Chi Wuyao extended a hand to grab it. She spared it a brief glance before she stored it away. A faint smile appeared on her face. "Very good. It looks like you have lived up to your word this once." Even though he had made this decision long ago, for him to so easily hand over the precious treasure left behind by his grand ancestor to the devils of the north was something that pierced him to the core. But he would not regret his decision. "Devil Queen, give the order." Zhou Yuzi stared straight ahead, his voice solemn and steady, but his heart was still filled with extreme anxiety. Before today, he had only ever had one interaction with Chi Wuyao, and it had left behind a dark shadow in his heart that had lasted a full 10 millennia. To him, Chi Wuyao was absolutely the most dreadful and cunning woman in the entire universe. Every second he spent facing off against her was fraught with tension, and all of his nerves were stretched taut. Because Chi Wuyao had been the one who had suggested this method of trade, he certainly would not simply agree to it, no matter how fair it sounded. He definitely had to change it or have the final say. Even now, when Xianxia had already fallen into his hands, Zhou Yuzi, who had already passed the untamed divine marrow over to Chi Wuyao, was still on his guard and vigilantly looking out for any possible accidents. He was especially afraid that Chi Wuyao would simply flee with the untamed divine marrow at this point. After all, she had definitely pried all of Xianxia's secrets out of his body, and if she could steal the heretic god's legacy or the sky poison pearl, she would have done so long ago. It was definitely possible that Chi Wuyao would throw the already useless Xianxia away at this point. However, he had been forced all the way back from his initial position by Chi Wuyao's repeated blows and constant pressure, so he had been left with no other choice. Xianxia. The thing that Zhou Yuzi was most worried about did not come to pass as Chi Wuyao calmly started to speak. "This queen commands you. Immediately purge the darkness that you planted in Zhou Qingchen from his body." Zhou Yuzi felt some tension bleed out of him. Furthermore, after he had received the command, Xianxia started to woodenly move forward. He came to a stop in front of Zhou Qingchen before he slowly raised a hand towards him. He still could not feel any vitality or soul energy coming from Xianxia's body. Whether it was his power or his soul, all of it had been completely suppressed and seized by Chi Wuyao. This was something that Zhou Yuzi had been convinced of from the start, and he did not find anything abnormal about it. But even so, even up to this point, his energy was still connected to Zhou Qingchen and the protective barrier that surrounded him. He had not withdrawn it for even a fraction of a second. An imperceptible ripple appeared in Chi Wuyao's eyes for a single instant. Back then, outside the destroyed blue pole star, Mu Xuanian had used most of her power to protect Xianxia even when she faced off against a gaggle of god emperors by herself. Now Zhou Yuzi, who was facing off against the Devil Queen and her two great witches in a dark and dangerous place, had also used most of his energy to protect Zhou Qingchen. If anything unexpected happened, he would not hesitate to sacrifice his own life to see Zhou Qingchen to safety. Heh! Chi Wuyao gave a soft chuckle, but it was a rather cold one. Xianxia's hand was being blocked by the barrier, so there was no way for him to touch Zhou Qingchen. Zhou Yuzi moved and made a gesture with his hand. The energy of the barrier instantly started flowing like running water as it covered Xianxia's hand and brought half of his arm inside of it. But at the same time, it also stuck to Xianxia's body and power. As such, if there was any abnormality in Xianxia's actions or aura, he would be the first to know. Aya, the eternal heaven god emperor is truly being cautious. But Xianxia happens to be the most obedient child by this queen's side. He won't eat your son, Chi Wuyao said with a seductive laugh. Zhou Yuzi stared at Xianxia's palm as he said in a low voice, "I'll have to trouble the Devil Queen to release the shackles on his power." Chi Wuyao tapped a finger gently in the air. The black mist curling around Xianxia instantly started to dissipate, clearly allowing the aura of Xianxia's power to leak through. When a person was released from someone else's suppression, it would take a rather long time for them to wake up and recover, no matter whether it was their power or soul that had been suppressed. This was especially true when it came to the suppression of one's soul. It would make that person feel like they had suddenly woken up from a nightmare. It would take a very long time for their mind to clear up once they had been completely released from the other person's control. However, even before the black mist had fully dissipated from Xianxia's body, a bizarre, blood-red light suddenly flashed in his originally dull and blank eyes. This bizarre scene that did not conform to any of the usual rules was instantly noticed by Zhou Yuzi, whose nerves were already stretched taut. Yet before he could even do anything, a pair of dark dragon eyes suddenly appeared in front of him. The furious roar of a dragon instantly exploded within his heart and soul. It sounded like it was simultaneously coming from the farthest reaches of the universe and the deepest abyss of despair. ROA, RRR. Countless blood vessels instantly popped out in Zhou Yuzi's eyes. He felt as if the world in front of him had explosively shattered into tiny fragments, turning into a chaotic blend of inky darkness and blinding light. Chi Wuyao's arm also shot out in that same instant. An energy star that was as black as dusk blazed through the air, leaving a trail of darkness in its wake. It instantly punched through the energy tether connecting Zhou Yuzi to Zhou Qingchen. Bang! The barrier shattered. Zhou Yuzi's body violently swayed, but he forced himself to stay on his feet. Dozens of millennia of wisdom and his enormous will allowed him to recover at an unfathomable speed as his murky eyes quickly regained their focus. He felt a splitting pain in his head, feeling as if thousands of waves were crashing about in his brain. But this pain was a tiny fraction of the shock he was feeling right now, because he saw a pair of blood-red eyes glaring at him through his blurred vision. The very first thought that occurred to his disoriented brain was that he had seen a real devil. As for Zhou Qingchen, that devil's hand was wrapped around his neck. Qingchen, the eternal heaven god emperor's eyes widened so much that they looked like they might tear themselves apart. He looked like he might faint at any moment. Yun Qi's eyes were glowing with devilish power. His black hair floated behind him, and his aura churned like a violent black flame. The hatred in his eyes felt like a pair of devilish blades that had been submerged in the blood pools of hell. He looked like he couldn't wait to tear the eternal heaven god emperor into the smallest, lowliest particles, using the most painful and cruelest methods he could think of. Black energy was rising from the hand Yun Qi used to clamp around Zhou Qingchen's neck. In fact, half of Zhou Qingchen's neck had already turned to charred flesh. Lifted into the air, the prince's eyes were rolling in their sockets, and his body was trembling violently in pain. However, the iron grip around his neck prevented him from making any sound at all. Yun Qi, you! Zhou Yuzi took a step forward, but he quickly stopped dead in his tracks. His mouth was agape, and his voice sounded impossibly hoarse. Chi Wuyao had strolled next to Yun Qi and fused her energy into Yun Qi's aura. An invisible, dark force field was pressing down on Zhou Yuzi's chest and keeping him from getting any closer to Yun Qi. The shock and confusion churning in Zhou Yuzi's heart was like a giant tsunami that threatened to overwhelm the sky itself. However, there was no mistaking Chi Wuyao's action. He understood what had happened almost immediately. You, Zhou Yuzi stuttered. He couldn't imagine how ugly his expression was right now. Crack! The sound of bones snapping suddenly pierced through everyone's eardrums like an arrow. Yun Qi had tightened his grip around Zhou Qingchen's neck, breaking it and causing the latter to turn stiff. A disgusting screech forcing itself out of his windpipe like escaped air from a crushed pipe. Stop! Zhou Yuzi felt as if his eyes were being stabbed by a pair of poisoned needles. Whatever he was attempting to say all dissolved into a fearful shout. He extended his arms as if the gesture would somehow save him, but his legs knew better than to take even a single step forward. Don't kill him! Don't kill him! People usually said that monarchs were cold-hearted, but to Zhou Qingchen was more important to Zhou Yuzi than his own life. Kayana Yinger wasn't kidding when she said that Zhou Qingchen might be Zhou Yuzi's biggest and only weakness. He had broken his own principles and beliefs to keep Zhou Qingchen from the world. He had stepped into the northern divine region to make a deal with the Devil Queen. He had offered her a valuable treasure that was second only to the eternal heaven pearl in the eternal heaven god realm. Zhou Yuzi looked like he would fall apart if anything were to happen to his son. No one would believe that he was a god emperor if they saw him right now. Most people would be moved by his deep love for his son. Unfortunately for him, all Yun Qi and Chi Wuyao felt was a deep sense of irony. Your love for your son is truly touching, eternal heaven god emperor. Even this queen is almost moved to tears. Chi Wuyao said with a smile before shooting a glance to her side. It took a lot of beating around the bush, but things were finally happening as he wanted. Technically, Chi Wuyao's plan was a success the moment Zhou Yuzi had brought Zhou Qingchen to her. After that, everything she did, the carrot, the stick, the verbal assaults, and so on, was in preparation for this one moment. The moment where Yun Qi kidnapped Zhou Qingchen right before Zhou Yuzi's eyes. Getting the untamed divine marrow was great, but it was at most a decent bonus. Xianxia couldn't possibly imagine that Chi Wuyao was aiming for his son, the child who had absolutely zero connections to her, and not the untamed divine marrow. Xianxia gritted his teeth until they felt like they would break from the sheer amount of force that was being applied to them. He dug his nails into his palm and forced himself to calm down with all his might. But no matter how hard he tried, he just couldn't imagine how or why the Devil Queen had joined forces with Chi. The Devil Queen was a cunning and cruel woman who hated the three divine regions above all else. Chi was a devil person born in the Eastern Divine Region and a bag of mysteries and secrets. Finally, he was told that Chi had offended both the soul-stealing realm and the Yama realm. No matter how he looked at it, Chi was prey to Chi Wuyao at best. Things should never have turned out like this. Even more puzzling was how Chi had regained himself immediately and snatched Zhou Qingchen from him. His power and his soul should have been under the Devil Queen's complete control. Zhou Qingchen's life was at stake here, so he had treated everything with maximum caution. He would have spotted an act immediately if that was the case. But none of this was important anymore. He had given up the untamed divine marrow, but not only was Zhou Qingchen still tainted by darkness, his life was in Chi's hands right now. Devil Queen, what is the meaning of this? How dare you go back on your word when this old one has surrendered the untamed divine marrow? Do you have no shame at all? Xianxia's voice sounded relatively calm, but his eyes betrayed his true emotions. He was deathly afraid that Chi would kill Zhou Qingchen on a whim. Oh, this queen doesn't understand what the eternal heaven god emperor is saying at all. Chi Wuyao explained herself slowly and lazily. This queen surrendered Chi to you first, and you the untamed divine marrow to me later as agreed upon. This queen then ordered Chi to cure Zhou Qingchen of his affliction immediately. This queen has followed the agreement to the letter, hasn't she? So why are you angry? I should be the one who was angry. How dare you accuse me of going against my word? Is this how a god emperor of the Eastern Divine Region usually conducts himself? If the first half of Chi Wuyao's words were indignant, the latter half were clearly laden with righteous anger. It was almost as if the eternal heaven god emperor had slandered her with the worst crime in the world. You! Xianxia's calm was shattered before it could hold together for 3 breaths. Again, this queen has executed our agreement to the letter. What Chi does during this time is none of my business, and frankly, why would I even care in the first place? His limbs are on his body, not mine. At number %, the eternal heaven god emperor felt like blacking out again. This time, even his internal organs were shaking with fury. It had been a long time since he became the great and respected eternal heaven god emperor. He had never been bullied this badly before, and he just could do nothing about it because Zhou Qingchen's life was in their hands. Good, very good. You truly deserve your title as the Northern Region Devil Queen. Xianxia nodded slowly. This old one will admit that he has lost this time. The untamed divine marrow is yours. This old one promises that he will never take another step into the Northern Divine Region after he returns to the Eastern Divine Region with Qingchen. He wasn't stupid enough to think that he could take back the untamed divine marrow at this point. Knowing how much Chi hated him, Zhou Qingchen would most likely be killed the moment he made the request. Xianxia had 2 goals in his mind when he came to the Northern Divine Region. The first was to cure Zhou Qingchen of darkness. The second was to kill Chi. In his imagination, the second Chi cured Zhou Qingchen of darkness, he would gather all of his power and attack Chi at this range. There was no way Chi would be alive. The prophecy that a devil god would bring carnage to the world hadn't left Xianxia's mind since the day he had heard it. Chi himself had proven himself to be a great threat when he killed 2 of his guardians, Tai Yin and Zhu Liu, and transformed his son into a devil person. So when he contacted the Devil Queen, he was already planning to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Once he killed Chi, he would pass the cured Zhou Qingchen to the waiting arms of Tai Yu and do his utmost to stop the Devil Queen and her witches. He would then make his own retreat after Honorable Tai Yu and his son had left the borders completely. If he could kill the devil person Chi, it didn't matter even if the news of him visiting the Northern Divine Region was exposed. The untamed divine marrow was incredibly precious, but if he could kill 2 birds with 1 stone, the return was worth as much as an untamed world pellet. When Chi Wuyao had given him a bewitched Chi and made the order, he had thought that everything was proceeding as planned. but it took only a second for his imagination to be shattered entirely. Now he knew that he was the one who was being played from the start worse. The best-case scenario available to him now was him leaving with Zhou Qingchen safely. What a sorrowful outcome that was. Return to the Eastern Divine Region with Qingchen. Yun Qi finally spoke up, and every word was infused with impossible hatred. You must still be dreaming, old dog eternal heaven. Because in my dreams, I spend my time drinking your blood and killing every last member of your filthy family. Zhou Yuzi's fingertips had sunk so deep into his palm that he was literally touching the bones. It was all to remain calm in an impossible situation. Quieting his aura so that he presented himself as no threat at all, he did his best to speak in a collected tone. Yun Qi, I know you hate me, but Qingchen has nothing to do with it. Then what about my daughter? What about my family? The angry roar of a beast of despair tore the eternal heaven god emperor's words to shreds. His fingers kept digging deeper and deeper into Zhou Qingchen's neck, dyeing half the man's clothes in reddish-black blood. Old dog eternal heaven, do you know how close my daughter came to dying when she was still in her mother's womb? Did you know that I wasn't there when she was born? Did you know that I only found her when she was 11, meaning that I hadn't performed my duties as a father for 11 years straight? He stared at Zhou Yuzi with bottomless anger and pain. And before I was able to make up even a shred of my failings to her, she gave up her greatest talent for me, a talent that can never be replicated again, all just to save my worthless, useless life. Chi Wuyao turned away and closed her eyes. Heh heh heh, Yun Qi was laughing, but it sounded more horrible than a ghost's wail. She is a debt I can never repay in full. She is far more important to me than my life. But you. He started trembling uncontrollably. His aura was so chaotic that it was a miracle that it hadn't fallen to shambles yet. It was because of you, my daughter, my family, my home, everything. Crack, several of Zhou Qingchen's neck bones snapped again. If Yun Qi continued to lose control, the man was dead for sure. Stop, Zhou Yuzi begged. I'm not the one who destroyed Blue Pole Star and killed your family and daughter, it was the Moon God Emperor. Nothing that happened afterward was what I wanted to happen. She will die, you all deserve to die as well. Yun Qi shouted at the top of his lungs, his eyes as red as the blood of the abyss. Suddenly, a soul voice entered everyone's mind. I will pay my father's debt. Kill me. Zhou Yuzi's eyes widened. He shouted, what nonsense are you spouting, Qingchen? Your father isn't dead yet. It's not your turn to pay any debt I owe. Icy, bloody tears flowed down Zhou Qingchen's cheeks. Yun Qi, please let him go, Zhou Yuzi begged. He hadn't begged this pitifully even when he was facing the heaven-smiting devil emperor herself. The sin is all mine. He didn't know anything, didn't do anything. He only had admiration and respect for you, and you were once friends, weren't you? He didn't say stupid things like offering up his own life in exchange for Zhou Qingchen's. If he killed himself, Zhou Qingchen's death was all but certain. You do not cut the weed and leave the roots intact. AI. Suddenly, Chi Wuyao sighed quietly and said, Yun Qi, that's enough. It's time to return Zhou Qingchen to him. If we stay here any longer, we'll be noticed by the Burning Moon Realm and Yama Realm. Zhou Yuzi was completely caught off guard by the Devil Queen's words. He felt like he was in a dream. Chi Wuyao turned toward him and smiled with ridicule. If Yun Qi really wanted to kill your son, he would have annihilated him into nothing the moment he got his hands on him. You wouldn't even have had the time to kneel and beg. He may possess darkness, profound energy now, but you should know his character better than most. He doesn't kill innocent people. It would only pollute his integrity and dirty his hands. Tears appeared in Zhou Yuzi's eyes. He started shaking again, but not out of fear or anger, but because he had suddenly found a faint hope in the depths of the abyss. That's right. He did know the old Yun Qi. There was no other youngster he admired, valued, and appreciated more than him back then. Before he fell into darkness, he once bore the holiest light in the world. He might have joined the Northern Divine Region. He might still hate him to the very bone, but he would never kill an innocent person without good reason. His eyes might be full of bloodthirst. His aura might have become fully corrupted, and the prophecy of the devil god was still looming over his head. But he needed to ignore all that right now. He needed to remember the boy he crowned the God-child Messiah himself before everything went to hell. He needed to believe, had to believe, that Yun Qi wouldn't kill Zhou Qingchen no matter what. He wouldn't. Right. Zhou Yuzi nodded repeatedly while shivering like a leaf. He gathered all the willpower he could muster into his eyes and begged. Zhou Yuzi, made a terrible mistake, an unforgivable mistake, but Qingchen is innocent. I'm the one you hate, and I'm the one who made all those mistakes. I know you won't kill him, so please let him go. If you do, I can promise you anything, anything." Chi Wuyao looked at Xianxia and said, "It's only a matter of time before you grow strong enough to murder Zhou Yuzi with your own hands. You'll only dirty your hands and humiliate yourself by killing someone who has nothing to do with your grudge. Come on, if we don't leave now, it'll be too late." But Xianxia neither moved nor withdrew the bloodthirst in his eyes in the slightest. "Old dog eternal heaven, kneel and kowtow 3 times to me. I'll let him go if you do that." There were no true gods in this world. Therefore, there was no one in the world who deserved a kowtow from the eternal heaven god emperor himself. Zhou Yuzi's mouth opened and closed several times as he watched Xianxia's aura. The young man looked like he would erupt at any moment. In the end, he said in the most powerless voice he used in his life, "Promise me." "Heh," Xianxia sneered at him. "There's nothing more I hate in this world than a person who betrays his word. You think I would break my word like you?" Bang, Zhou Yuzi's knees hit the floor powerlessly. The proud head that he had never bent once for the heaven-smiting devil emperor herself hit the dark soil beneath his feet loudly. A cruel, ridiculing glint flashed across Chi Wuyao's eyes as she watched him. Drip, drip, drip. The blood and tears dripping from Zhou Qingshan's feet matched the sound of Zhou Yuzi's head hitting the ground with ironic synchrony. Bang! Zhou Yuzi's head hit the ground for the 3rd time, and he looked up dazedly at Zhou Qingshan. He even forgot to get back to his feet. "Good, very good." Xianxia smiled and loosened his grip over Zhou Qingshan's neck. Crunch! Zhou Yuzi's pupils dilated to their limit. Instead of putting Zhou Qingshan back on the ground, Xianxia had plunged an arm right through his son's chest. Boom! Dark energy flashed from the bloody arm, and Zhou Qingshan exploded into a million pieces. The only thing left in his vision beneath the shower of blood was Xianxia's cruel, devilish smile from hell. Zhou Yuzi didn't move a muscle. His mouth was open, but no voice came out. His environment was dark and eerie, but his eyes were shockingly white. Right now, there was nothing more hopeless than the blood before his eyes. True despair was without color or sound. It was the same as when Blue Pole Star was destroyed right in front of Xianxia. The only thing more dreadful than despair itself was the despair created from the death of hope. "Heh, hee hee." The low chuckle sounded like the chant of the devil. After casting away the dirty blood clinging to his hand, Xianxia watched his crushed enemy and burned with absolute satisfaction for the first time since the day he overflowed with hatred. "So, how does it feel, old dog eternal heaven? Doesn't it feel great to watch the person you value the most die horribly right before your eyes? Doesn't it? I'm a bloodthirsty, cruel, sinful, inhuman devil person whose existence was denied by the world itself, and you chose to believe what I said. You believed me, you stupid old dog. Ha 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 ha. A-H-A-H-A-H-A-H-A-H-A-H-A-H-A-H-A-H-A. He laughed like he had gone completely mad. His black hair was swinging all over the place. However, it was impossible to miss the heart-wrenching pain and blood behind his mad laughter. Zhou Yuzi finally turned his head slowly toward Xianxia and Chi Wuyao. He possessed the body of a god emperor, but his movement was so slow and stiff it was as if he was a poorly made marionette. A tiny voice squeaked through his lips. "You! The untamed divine marrow is a good thing to have," Chi Wuyao said, "but my desire to meet you was nothing compared to Xianxia's. How does it feel to bear Xianxia's pain and despair? Oh, what am I saying?" Chi Wuyao shook her head. "You still have your home, your subordinates, your family, your children, your grandchildren. This is just the appetizer." Chi Wuyao stretched out her little finger. "You've only just begun to pay back everything you owe him. But don't worry, it is only a matter of time. One day you'll pay back everything you owe 1 time, 10 times, 100 times over." It was supposed to be Xianxia's grudge, but for some reason Chi Wuyao's eyes were deathly cold as well. Zhou Yuzi started trembling uncontrollably. Suddenly, blood started pouring out of his eyes, his ears, his nose, and his mouth. "A-A-A-H!" Zhou Yuzi, the kindest and gentlest of all god emperors, screamed like an animal as his profound energy exploded like shattering stars. All around him, the world started crumbling at an astonishing rate. The power of a despairing god emperor was nothing to scoff at. But Chi Wuyao was long ready for this. She hit Xianxia once in the chest and knocked him away. Then she swung a strip of black fabric at Zhou Yuzi with her left hand. The power of 2 god emperors clashed against one another. The dark world around them instantly suffered massive damage. At this point, Zhou Yuzi had turned completely insane. He screamed again and again and threw his power all over the place like a child. Rumble! Suddenly, the sound of an unnatural explosion cut through the space of destruction between the two god emperors, and Chi returned with blood-red profound energy covering his entire body. Screaming even louder and crazier than Yuzi was, he charged toward the ladder and swung his gigantic, vermilion-colored sword straight at his head. "Old dog eternal heaven, die, die!" Chi's maximum power was comparable to that of a level 7 divine master after he activated Hell Monarch. Had Yuzi been clear-headed, he would have been shocked by Chi's power. The moment Yuzi sensed Chi's aura, he ignored Chi Wuyao's power completely and pounced toward Chi like a despairing wolf who had caught the scent of blood. Rumble, the earth turned upside down, and countless mountains crumbled from the impact. Although Chi Wuyao managed to leave a bloody wound at Yuzi's waist, the latter's power still hit Chi's heaven-smiting sword directly. Chi had been improving at an impossible rate, but there was no way he could fight against a rampaging god emperor right now. The impact sounded like the sky itself was shattering, or two stars colliding into one another. Blood sprayed out of Chi's throat, and he was knocked back like a wilted branch in a hurricane. However, it took Chi only a moment to regain his bearings, swallow the blood in his mouth, hold up the sword he hadn't let go even after his bones were broken from the impact, and channel it with the red energy of hatred once more. Then he pounced toward Yuzi again. Chi Wuyao sighed inside her mind. She had foreseen this from the start. This was the main reason she had ordered Jai Xin and Jai Ling to follow her on this trip. She rose into the air and made a devilish hand seal, gathering the darkness energy around her to drive back Yuzi. At the same time, she fired a black beam from her eyes straight at Yuzi's soul. It was the soul of the Nirvana Devil Emperor. The eternal heaven god emperor's soul trembled in fear when his 10,000-year-old trauma was brought back to life. As a result, Chi Wuyao successfully drove back both his power and his person. However, the god emperor was still rampaging and doing everything in his power to get at Chi. A barrier appeared out of nowhere and knocked Chi away before he could reach Yuzi. Then, two white figures appeared from the darkness and immobilized Chi with their power. It was Jai Xin and Jai Ling. The combined might of two level 10 divine masters was so great that Chi couldn't even lift a finger, much less charge toward Yuzi again. "UAAHH, I'll kill HIM, I'll kill HIM, AAH." Chi screamed like a madman as he struggled to free himself. Every time he shouted, bloody spittle would fly out of his throat. Jai Xin and Jai Ling were completely unmoved. Today, their only task was to keep Chi under control. Chi Wuyao was in her element, and it barely took her any effort to damage Yuzi's soul because the latter was in a state of madness. However, the god emperor seemed to have gone completely mad, and despite the painful roars Chi Wuyao caused with her attacks, he continued to charge toward Chi from every possible angle he could conceive of. The hatred in his eyes was as red as Chi's own. It was at this moment that a new aura approached from the distance. Honorable Tai Yu quickly appeared in the black fog. Yuzi hadn't messaged him, but the clash between two god emperors was impossible to miss. A crazed Yuzi, a missing Qingchen, Honorable Tai Yu understood what had happened immediately. The only thing that could drive his lord to insanity was Qingchen's death. But this was the land of darkness, and the Devil Queen wasn't alone today. The two witches who were keeping Chi under control were shockingly powerful. Besides that, another level 8 divine master was heading their way. "My lord, we need to go." Honorable Tai Yu tore apart the layers of darkness blocking his way and grabbed Yuzi's arm. "We need to go now." Bang. Yuzi knocked away both his arm and his person. Honorable Tai Yu rushed back to his god emperor immediately and blocked his way. He stared straight into the hateful eyes of Yuzi and said, "My lord, will you let Qingchen die for nothing? We must leave and take our revenge later." His son's name pierced through Yuzi's soul like a needle. The eternal heaven god emperor finally regained a bit of clarity. A bit of light suddenly shone through the all-consuming darkness. Nearly 90% of the shining object was destroyed by the terrible, black storm around him, but what remained of it continued to shine a bright, white light into Yuzi's eyes. Yuzi froze for a second before holding the jade in his palm. He held it tightly, terrified of damaging the object any more than he already had. It was the longevity jade he had personally forged for his son on his birthday. The jade hadn't left his son's side until the very moment he died. The madness faded away, and tears poured down his cheeks. He turned away and flew away with Honorable Tai Yu, his back looking as mournful as a fading sunset. Chi Wuyao. The hatred and sorrow behind Zhou Yuzi's voice could fill up the whole sky. I will gather everything the eternal heaven god realm has, the eastern divine region, and even the 3 divine regions themselves, to destroy the northern divine region and grind both of you down to ash. The sky abruptly darkened. Somehow, Chi was able to distort the combined power of Jai Xin and Jai Ling just a little using eternal calamity of darkness and free himself before they could do anything. He charged straight toward Zhou Yuzi, but rip. A golden shadow cut through space and wrapped around Chi like a spirit snake, sealing all of his movements by force. Then Kainai Yinger appeared in front of Chi and grabbed him by the shoulders. She said seriously, "Save your strength. You can't kill him the way you are right now." In the distance, Zhou Yuzi and Honorable Tai Yu finally vanished completely from everyone's sight and spiritual perception. Chi trembled uncontrollably as his pupils shrank. A shower of blood burst through his lips, and his eyes turned still. He collapsed as if all of his energy and his soul were drained away from his body. His consciousness sank into oblivion. By killing Zhou Qingchen right in front of Zhou Yuzi, he was finally able to vent his anger. But that was all. The inability to do anything to Zhou Yuzi even though he was right in front of him. The self-loathing that his powerlessness caused that was the worst pain and torment of it all. Chi Wuyao walked over and glanced once at the unconscious Chi. She sighed. He acts like a child even though he's changed into a spirit of vengeance. Kainai Yinger carried Chi in her arms before saying quietly, "Maybe we've all forgotten that he's only 30 years old. He is a child." Chi Wuyao. Kainai Yinger turned away and walked back to the dark, profound arc. She made sure to walk slowly and quietly. It took a while before their figures were swallowed by darkness. "Ai." Chi Wuyao shook her head slightly. "I wonder if I did the right thing." "Hua Jin," Chi Wuyao called out, and the witch appeared in front of her in a kneeling position. "How is it?" she asked. Hua Jin held up a black pearl and said, "Here. We have the eternal heaven god emperor to thank for everything going so smoothly." Chi Wuyao accepted the black pearl and scanned it once with her consciousness. A smile appeared across her lips. "Well done." Suddenly her eyes changed without warning as she vanished before Hua Jin. Caught off guard, the witch nearly said something before covering her own mouth. Then she concealed her aura and vanished into nothing like a ghost. Chi Wuyao passed through the space of darkness and reappeared outside. She spread her spiritual perception 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000 kilometers away in an instant, but a frown quickly appeared on her face. "Show yourself," she threatened, leaving a permanent sound ripple in space. But she couldn't find any aura or signs that someone had been here a moment ago, much less get a response. Chi Wuyao withdrew her spiritual perception and muttered to herself. "Did I make a mistake?" She exhaled quietly before vanishing into thin air. 1 breath, 2 breaths, 3 breaths, shred. Chi Wuyao appeared from a rift in space and spread her consciousness to the max at the fastest possible speed. She had absolute confidence in her own senses, but still, she found nothing at all. That tiny, fleeting aura had somehow escaped her spiritual perception in just a fraction of an instant. But someone like that didn't exist in this world, not anymore. So who could it be? The profound arc passed through many dark layers of space and returned to the soul-stealing realm. It was much faster than when it first came. Kainai Yinger was standing at the side of the ship, black wind whipping her golden hair into a beautiful frenzy. For some reason, the darkness in her eyes seemed a little different from before. A black shadow appeared behind her without a sound. It was Chi Wuyao. "Has he awakened?" Chi Wuyao walked up to Kainai Yinger and asked. "He has." "Where were you?" Kainai Yinger answered simply. It was almost as if she just noticed the former's arrival. "I went to clean up some tracks that shouldn't be left behind," Chi Wuyao replied before frowning a little. Kainai Yinger's unconscious question had made her recall that flash of an aura she couldn't find again, no matter how she tried. It was almost the strangest thing she had ever encountered in the northern divine region. It was one thing if the stranger had had such an amazing concealment ability that she never noticed them in the first place. But the stranger had let themselves slip. She should have been able to catch them immediately. Not even a concealment technique as powerful as moon-splitting cascade could make someone vanish so quickly and so thoroughly upon detection. At the very least, she didn't know anyone who could pull off such a thing. "Is something bothering you?" Kainai Yinger shot her a sideways glance. "Of course." Chi Wuyao gave her a smile. I am the Northern Region Devil Queen, the monarch of the soul-stealing realm and the caretaker of many, many children. I'm almost always bothered by something. Kai and Yinger knew that she was dodging the question, but she didn't dig deeper besides letting out a snort. Her mind was somewhere else anyway. Chi Wuyao looked at the gray sky above their heads and said, "The day will be over in another 15 minutes. I don't want to see him right now," Kai and Yinger replied indifferently. "I've come to the conclusion that I need to think some things through." "Does that mean you've acknowledged what I told you earlier?" Chi Wuyao asked with a lazy smile on her face. "Still, there are some things in this world that are best left unthought about. It'll only grow increasingly if you try. You should go about your life after you confirm that it exists or not." "What should I do if it does exist?" Kai and Yinger unconsciously looked down at her feet. "For someone of my standing." She was actually deferring to Chi Wuyao for guidance. She finally understood where her strange hostility toward Chi Wuyao had come from, and even now she still disliked the woman deeply. But she seemed to be the only one who was qualified to give her an answer right now. "You either remove it completely, or you obey what your heart tells you to do," Chi Wuyao answered easily. "Either choice is better than ignorance, self-denial, and being stuck in limbo." "That being said, if only it was that easy to remove." Chi Wuyao shook her head and didn't continue further. Kai and Yinger snorted derisively at herself. "Once upon a time, I thought that all men in the world were low-born. I thought that none of them even had the right to enter my sight, much less touch a hair on my body. Who would have thought that I would fall this far? What a joke, what a joke. Feel free to laugh at me if you wish, Chi Wuyao." "And why would I do that?" There was actually a bit of self-derision in Chi Wuyao's voice. "If we're talking about walking jokes, then I'm an even bigger joke than you are." Kai and Yinger had been staring at nothing all this time, so she didn't notice Chi Wuyao's eyes or pay too much heed to her choice of words. After all, Chi Wuyao was a woman who supposedly climbed her way to the top over the corpses of men by trampling on those feelings. She was perfectly within her rights to call herself a joke. "I don't understand. I hated him and found him disgusting. I planted the Brahma soul death-wishing mark in him that tortured him so much that he was on the verge of suicide, and he planted the slave imprint that destroyed my honor forever. The only thing we should ever have in common is a sea of hatred that could never be reconciled toward each other. So how did this happen? Is it really that difficult of a question for you?" Chi Wuyao asked. "Recall the moment your one wish was to see him dead, the moment you hated him more than anything in the world. Even then, you won't deny that he's the most special and mysterious man you've ever encountered in your life, am I right?" Kai and Yinger didn't deny it. There is nothing more dangerous in the world to a woman than a man's secrets. From the moment you wish to know them, you are already one step away from crossing the point of no return. And when you were still the Brahma monarch goddess, I doubt there was any other secret you wanted to know more than Yun Chi's. Kai and Yinger's lips parted slightly. She was shocked to discover that those memories had taken on an entirely different shade before she realized it. He was the one that came to your mind when you were at the bottom of your despair. He was the one by your side at the most painful moment of your life. He was the only ray of light you had when there was only darkness around you, and he was the one who held your hand when you walked out of the abyss together. Before you knew it, he began to occupy so much space in your heart that it exceeds even the hatred that you once thought to be everything in your life. Perhaps you might even feel that your hatred doesn't seem all that important anymore." Kai and Yinger's pupils trembled violently. The moment the slave imprint was planted inside her, and the days Yun Chi called her Slave Ying, should be a brand of humiliation she would never be able to wash away for the rest of her life. But today, she realized that the sense of humiliation had actually faded somewhat. Killing Kai Fanshan should have been the one obsession she still had in life after he betrayed her. It was certainly the one goal that brought her all the way to the northern divine region. To that end, she could swear an oath to surrender everything, kneel before Yun Chi, and even beg him to plant the slave imprint inside her. She still wanted revenge, but if it turned out to be a pipe dream, if the only future left for her was an eternity of solitude in the northern divine region with Yun Chi, she was shocked that she hadn't rejected the thought immediately. Shocked that she was actually looking forward to that future a bit. "This truly is the scariest thing in the world," Kai and Yinger muttered. Once, Heavenly Wolf Zissou had risked literally everything for her. He even gave up his life as a result. At the time, the only thing she had to offer his devotion was scorn and ridicule. Today, she understood him. She actually understood him for once. "I know this all seems pretty unbelievable to you, but to me, This is a natural result. And let's not forget that he claimed every inch of your body even before you had fallen for him. Chi Wuyao glanced at Kai Yinger before teasing her lightly. The Brahma monarch goddess is beautiful beyond measure, and any man who caught you is sure to enjoy you day and night. I bet your body has molded itself to fit his shape perfectly, am I right? You'll never escape him for as long as you live. You, shut up. Kai Yinger looked away. Chi Wuyao stared at the side view of Kai Yinger's face and felt the corner of her lips turn up a little. If your old, heartless self could win the mindless infatuation of countless god children and princes even when you treated them like dirt, then I can only imagine how they would feel if they saw you right now. Chi Wuyao, Kai Yinger said suddenly. You've experienced countless men in your life. You probably know men better than most, am I right? Chi Wuyao. Anyway, I want to ask you something. That was what she said, but she was staring in the opposite direction of Chi Wuyao's face, and she was mumbling unlike herself at all. Do you think he? You want to know if Xianxia has feelings for you? Chi Wuyao said bluntly on her behalf. Kai Yinger turned even further away and nodded almost imperceptibly. Of course not. If Chi Wuyao was blunt earlier, then it was nothing compared to her answer. Kai Yinger closed her eyes for a moment before smiling derisively at herself. I thought so. The way he is right now, he would not feel such a thing for anyone. He wouldn't dare, Chi Wuyao explained. Remember that he lost everything he ever left in a single moment. He wouldn't allow himself to be distracted by anything until his revenge is fulfilled, and even then, it's impossible to tell if he will ever walk out of that nightmare. Or if he even wants to. Chi Wuyao sighed quietly. She was sure that Kai Yinger had noticed the death wish Xianxia hid behind his hatred. Kai Yinger's eyes grew distant. So distracted was she that she didn't even notice that Chi Wuyao knew Xianxia a little too well. Kai Yinger started turning around and walking away. A heavy weight sat inside her mind. Aren't you going to say thank you? Chi Wuyao asked. Kai Yinger paused for a second before answering in a cold tone. I still despise you, you know. Chi Wuyao smiled and paid no mind to her insult at all. Instead, she said something that puzzled Kai Yinger. Well, I personally would like to thank you for all you did. Kai Yinger frowned, but she was distracted enough that she decided to keep walking and put her puzzlement to the back of her mind. She quickly vanished from Chi Wuyao's sight. She was heading to where Xianxia was. Chi Wuyao lifted her chin and looked at the sky. Not even the black fog covering her face could block the dark and charming gleam in her eyes. She said to herself, so long as the eternal heaven god emperor hasn't lost all reason, there's a 99% chance he would not risk everything and attack the northern divine region by force. That being said, I should be ready for even the smallest possibilities. The lowest room of the darkness profound arc was exceptionally quiet. Xianxia had curled into a ball and sat at the narrowest corner of the room. He was holding the 3 glazed sound stones Yun Wuxin gave him and rubbing his finger over them again and again. It was his way of spending time with his daughter on her 18th birthday. Wuxin, did you know that Su Zhizhen had asked for my permission to betroth his 18-year-old son, Su Hanlu, to you on Grandpa's 70th birthday? 1. At the time, the only thought in my mind was to break his leg and throw him out of the house. As your father, it isn't my right to interfere with your life after you became an adult. But the moment I thought that someone might take you away from me, I just couldn't stop myself from the fear, the panic, the anger. A long time ago, a 15-year-old girl just like you asked for my hand, and her father went absolutely ballistic. At the time, all I could think of was how unkingly he looked and how crazy he was acting. That lasted until the day Su Zhizhen asked me that question, and I realized that even you would marry someone and leave me to lead your own life one day. If that day were to pass by, I would probably hide my sadness behind my smile just like her dad had. But I let even something that precious slip through my grasp forever. Wuxin, you are the best daughter in the world. You shouldn't have had the misfortune of being born to the most useless and undeserving father in the world. Right now, my biggest wish is to reach the other side of the world and make it up to you, even if I have to walk through a sea of swords and swim through a sea of blood to do it. Wait for me. I won't keep you waiting for too long. Bang! Suddenly the door was thrown open roughly. It was Kai Yinger. Xianxia looked up from between his knees and tried to say something, but the carrier of the familiar scent suddenly grabbed him and pushed him to the ground. Rip. Kai Yinger's black clothes suddenly disappeared on their own to reveal the flawless skin beneath them. Xianxia froze for a second before he regained himself. I don't feel like cultivating today. I don't feel like it either. Kai Yinger's mask fell off. An exquisite countenance that could outshine even the brightest light and color in the world revealed itself to him. And for the first time, he saw a misty look in her eyes that was so beautiful that it dazed even him. I just suddenly feel like testing how it feels to be on top. Jai Xin and Jai Ling suddenly sensed something at the same time and glanced at one another. Master, there seems to be a strange noise somewhere, Jai Xin said. It's Yun Kaiying's voice, Jai Ling added. Is she hurt? This voice is... Hua Jin listened closely to the noise before an unnatural rosiness suddenly raced across her cheeks. Wait, I think it's... Chi Wuyao turned around to face her three witches and smiled. Not everyone gets to hear the sweet, immortal moans of the Brahma monarch goddess herself, my dears, so pay attention. You may regret this for life if you miss even an instant of it. Jai Xin, Jai Ling, and Hua Jin's lips fell open. It took them a while before they finally regained themselves and escaped like the wind. Realm, a ray of gentle moonlight the color of snow shone into the hall. As a cold breeze gently blew into the hall, the hazy and ephemeral figure of a woman could be glimpsed amidst the rippling layers of muslin. She stood by the window, her beautiful eyes closed. Her long hair and purple robe fluttered gently in the wind. However, an aloof and distant nobility was radiating from this calm and quiet woman, making it hard to even look at her directly, much less profane her with any untoward thoughts. A young girl walked into the room quietly. Dressed in light yellow palace robes, her beauty was stunning. She was so beautiful that conflict and disaster would have stalked her footsteps in any star realm. Her footsteps were light and full of reverence, her delicate head crooked in a slight bow. The bright and pure moonlight shone on the girl's face and svelte body, lighting up an exquisite face that reminded people of a freshly bloomed lotus, a face that elicited feelings of endearment and tenderness in all who set their eyes upon it. Just a single glimpse at the exquisite curve of her jaw would pluck at the heartstrings of most people. The girl came to a halt in the middle of the hall. She made a graceful curtsy and spoke in a soft voice. Master, Jin Yue has something to report. The moon god emperor opened her beautiful eyes. Profound purple light seemed to be flickering in the depths of her eyes. What's the matter? Reporting to Master. Lion Yue just sent us a piece of news. The eternal heaven god emperor, who had left the eternal heaven realm 60 hours ago while disguising his appearance and aura, has returned to his realm. However, it seems like he has sustained some pretty serious injuries. Lion Yue intentionally went to find some of the tracks he had left behind while he was returning to the realm, and she found spots of blood in 34 different places in a short 50-kilometer radius. Furthermore, it seemed to be Heart's blood. Her voice sounded like the happy chirping of a nightingale, but it still contained the same gentle refinement that radiated from her person. I understand, the moon god emperor said. His aura definitely must have been extremely agitated for him to vomit out so much blood, to the point where he even left such clear tracks. It looks like many other people have noticed this incident as well. There's one other thing, Jin Yue said as she raised a snowy hand. There was a purple crystal jade in her hand. This is the item that Master instructed us to obtain. The moon god emperor did not move to take the item. She swept her spiritual perception over it indifferently as she said, Very good. Pass it over to Yao Yue and tell her to find an opportunity to pass it to Luo Changsheng within a year. Remember, it can only fall into Luo Changsheng's hands. No one else can know about it. We also mustn't leave behind any clues that he would use to connect this to us. But the most important thing is that this task must be completed within the year. Yes, Jin Yue will do as instructed. Jin Yue gave a respectful bow as she gracefully straightened her body and prepared to leave. Jin Yue. The moon god emperor suddenly called out to her. Jin Yue hurriedly turned around. What instructions does Master have? The item that I asked you to destroy a few days ago, have you already confirmed its destruction? The moon god emperor asked, her voice so indifferent that Jin Yue could not hear the slightest bit of emotion in it. Jin Yue was slightly shocked by the question, but she immediately bowed her head and replied, How could Jin Yue dare to neglect Master's orders? I destroyed it long ago. That's good then. The moon god emperor slowly closed her eyes, hiding that purple light that seemed even more mysterious than the depths of the blue sea. You may withdraw. Jin Yue turned around and left the hall in an unhurried manner. She had vaguely sensed that the moon god emperor seemed exhausted. After she returned to her own bedchambers, Jin Yue arrived in front of her couch and opened a barrier. After that, she gently retrieved a small and delicate bronze mirror from her personal spatial pocket. It glowed with a rather dull golden sheen, and it radiated the aura of normal metal. This was a bronze mirror that could not be any more ordinary, and this sort of trinket could only be freely found in the lower realms. As she grasped the bronze mirror in her hand, moonlight faintly glimmered on her palm. Given her power, she only needed to tap the mirror with her aura to reduce it to dust. However, the girl's clear eyes wavered, and the moonlight in her hand started to slowly dissipate. If Master truly wanted to destroy it, she would do it herself instead of handing it to someone else. If Master has any regrets in the future, she opened her palm again, and the glimmering moonlight reappeared. However, this time it took the form of a small protective barrier, which glowed with a warm and gentle light. She very carefully deposited the bronze mirror in her personal spatial pocket. Jin Yue, Yao Yue, and Lion Yue were the three maidservants who were closest to Xia Qingyu. However, Lion Yue, who controlled the Moon God Realm's intelligence network, and Yao Yue, who was one of the Moon Gods, were often abroad on missions. Hence, Jin Yue was the one who had spent the most time by Xia Qingyu's side, so she was well aware that this mirror was something Xia Qingyu had kept by her side all this while. Eastern Divine Region, Eternal Heaven God Realm. K. The Eternal Heaven God Emperor held a hand against his chest as bloody foam continued to gush from his mouth. But his actions did not alleviate the intense pain in his heart at all. All those years ago, his beloved wife had smiled at him with tears in her eyes as she used her very last breath to personally place Zhou Qingchen in his arms. After that, she had left his side forever. Even though he was a god emperor, he threw aside all of the dignity of his role as he wept and wailed. The pain of losing her had pierced his heart, and he had thought that there could be no greater pain than the pain he felt on the day he lost her. However, the piercing pain in his heart right now far exceeded the pain he had experienced back then. He could only watch helplessly as Zhou Qingchen died a miserable death, without even leaving a corpse behind. And he was the one who had brought him to the Northern Divine Region. The strike he had delivered to Jasmine all those years ago had been repaid against Zhou Qingchen. He felt as if millions of poisoned knives were ripping at his heart and soul in the most cruel manner. The pain assaulting him at this moment could not be described with any words. Unimaginable feelings of self-recrimination, pain, regret, hatred, and resentment rolled over him, making him feel as if he was being tormented by countless demons. "My lord," Tai Yu half knelt by his side, his old eyes wet with tears. Zhou Zuzi had normally been quite strict and severe with Zhou Qingchen, but the Guardians were well aware that he actually valued Zhou Qingchen more than his own life. Zhou Zuzi shook his head, and a long period of time passed before he finally managed to speak with much difficulty. "I am all right, Keh." Yet another arrow of thick blood shot out of his mouth and formed a puddle on the floor. It was bright red and garish to the eye, and actually resembled a beating heart that had just been ripped out of someone's chest. Tai Yu gave a silent sigh before his eyes grew focused, and he suddenly said, "My lord, should we?" No. Zhou Zuzi's voice was weak and feeble, but he still managed to wave his arm slowly. "We must not be rash. We can't act rashly any longer. I've already led Qingchen to his death, so how can I allow our eternal heaven realm to suffer for my mistake? Moreover, Qingchen is already gone, so how can I allow the fact that he had been transformed into a devil become known to the world? Let's at least allow him to pass on with a clean name." "I understand." Honorable Tai Yu closed his eyes due to the pain. "But if my lord is not able to give vent to the knots in his heart, I'm afraid. Qingchen won't have died in vain." Zhou Zuzi's eyes were lifeless, but his tired voice now contained a sinister darkness and heaviness that it had never contained before. The prophecy was right. Yun Qi is indeed a devil who will bring calamity to the world. I still have about 10,000 years left to live, and I will devote my life to a single purpose. I will personally avenge Qingchen. I will personally purge this world of all devils. This was the fiercest, most resolute vow he had ever sworn in his life. Even if he still felt some lingering guilt toward Yun Qi in the past, the only thing that remained now was a hatred that was carved into his very bones. A few days later, the news that Eternal Heaven Crown Prince Zhou Qingchen had passed away was announced in the Eastern Divine Region. His profound energy had backfired on him while he was in seclusion, resulting in his unfortunate death. The Eternal Heaven God realm was draped in white. All of the realms were left in shock, and countless wild guesses flew in the air. Northern Divine Region, Soul-Stealing Realm. Now that Yun Qi had made all 9 witches, 27 soul spirits, and 3,600 soul attendants perfectly compatible with the darkness. The strength that formed the core of the soul-stealing realm had undergone an earth-shaking transformation. The truly terrifying thing about this transformation was that it had happened without anyone noticing a thing. The only way anyone would find out was if they got into a full-blown conflict with the soul-stealing realm. Otherwise, there was basically no way for anyone to detect the changes from their auras alone. As time went by, this rebirth would produce greater and greater results, and allow them to far exceed the devil people who once had the same aptitude as them, who were once on the same level as them. Yet there was no way they could use their newfound advantage to swallow up the burning moon realm or the Yama realm in the next few years. The amount of time they needed was at least 1,000 years. 1,000 years was not a very long time in the God realm. If it only took 1,000 years for the soul-stealing realm to grow strong enough to suppress all the other king realms, it would already be considered a miracle. Xianxia could not wait for such a long time. The 3 years that he had set was not part of some grand plan, it was the limit of his patience. After he had given vent to his hatred by mercilessly killing Zhou Qingchen in front of Zhou Zuzi, he had not obtained even a moment of relief. Instead, that act had caused him to feel new and persistent agitation. Due to this, Xianxia had chosen to remain in quiet seclusion for the entire 10 days since he had returned to the soul-stealing realm. His hatred was too vast, too deep. Zhou Zuzi was only one of its targets. The barrier placed over the door distorted and a figure draped in black mist entered the hall. It was Chi Wuyao. After taking a single glance at Xianxia's current state, Chi Wuyao said in a merry voice, "It looks like your recovery is going well. Let me tell you, this queen has been worried sick the last few days." Her voice was both bewitching and seductive, but one could still hear the lovable innocence of a young girl in that voice. It even caused Qianai Yinger's heart to quiver rather violently. She swiftly rose to her feet and stood next to Xianxia before she asked in a cold voice, "Why have you come?" "You'll have to ask the man who's beside you," Chi Wuyao said as her brows arched up. He was the one who asked this queen to come. Qianai Yinger was left momentarily speechless. "What sort of place is the Bone Sea of Eternal Darkness?" Xianxia said as he raised his head to look at Chi Wuyao. This was a name that Qianai Yinger had mentioned to him before they entered the soul-stealing realm, and it was a name that had remained lodged in his mind. "Oh!" Chi Wuyao's beautiful eyes calmly flickered towards Qianai Yinger before she replied. "The Bone Sea of Eternal Darkness is located at the very center of the northern divine region, at the bottom of the Yama realm. Why are you suddenly asking about such a place?" "I heard that it is the northern divine region's darkness origin vein." Xianxia asked. However, when Qianai Yinger had told him about this rumor, he had dismissed it outright. "Origin vein?" As expected, Chi Wuyao narrowed her eyes when she heard those words. She replied, "Other people might believe those words. But if you, the person who inherited the might of the heaven-smiting devil emperor, heard such words, it should be nothing more than a joke to you, correct? The northern divine region is shrinking every year. It is shrinking with every breath. If there was truly such a thing as an origin vein, it should long ago have become a dead one." Chi Wuyao continued. "That being said, even though it cannot be called an origin vein, it is indeed the place where darkness energy is the thickest and most concentrated in the northern divine region. It is also the most important reason for the Yama realm's continued supremacy." "So where does its darkness energy come from?" Xianxia asked. Chi Wuyao replied, "According to the primordial records, many devil gods would fall every year during the drawn-out war between the god and devil races. The devils of exalted position would have their own tombs erected for them, though those tombs have already long since been picked clean. It was the same for the gods as well. Most of the legacies of divine power that the divine regions have obtained, besides the few spirit remnants, have all been dug up by the star realms. In fact, there were still countless people digging around in the God realm trying to discover an undiscovered opportunity in this very day and age. However, the low-ranking devils, the biggest casualties of this war, their devil corpses were all thrown together in one place. As the war between the gods and devils escalated, it grew much more terrible than anyone had ever imagined it would be. More and more devils started to die, and in the end, this burial ground became a huge sea of corpses. And as the years flowed by, these devil corpses eventually turned into countless devil bones. And that is the Bone Sea of Eternal Darkness, as we know it today. It is also due to this reason that the Bone Sea is filled with incredibly dense yin energy, death energy, and resentment. The darkness energy in that place is far denser than in any other place in the northern divine region. When she mentioned that last bit, Chi Wuyao saw a bizarre black light flash in Yun Chi's eyes. "It seems like you're very interested in the bone sea of eternal darkness," Chi Wuyao said with a faint smile on her face. "Just as I had expected." Yun Chi slowly got to his feet. When he had first heard about the bone sea of eternal darkness from Kai and Yinger, he had more or less figured out what kind of place it was. A sea of ancient devil corpses. He had been right on the money. "We'll conquer the Yama realm first." Yun Chi's eyes were dark and gloomy, and he had said those 6 earth-shattering words without a single hint of emotion. "When do you intend to do so?" Chi Wuyao asked. "In 16 months' time." Yun Chi indifferently set another date. "At the latest." Even though the core strength of the soul-stealing realm had, for all intents and purposes, been reborn, swallowing up the Yama realm was still an impossible task. But since Yun Chi dared to say such a thing, he had definitely made his own plans. She had long since witnessed the strength of the calamity and misfortune formation. Furthermore, it was possible that this was just the tip of the iceberg when it came to the eternal calamity of darkness. However, Chi Wuyao did not immediately agree with Yun Chi. Instead, she replied in a slow and gentle manner, "Even though this is something that looks to be impossible under normal circumstances, it is something that this queen is willing to believe since those words came from your mouth. However, if we can truly possess the power to suppress the Yama realm at that time, why aren't we swallowing up the burning moon realm first?" Chi Wuyao's words caused Kai and Yinger's eyebrows to jump violently. She asked, "According to what I know, even though the burning moon realm is weaker than the Yama realm, there isn't a huge gulf of power between them." "No, you're only half correct. There are some things you are unaware of." Chi Wuyao glanced at Kai and Yinger before asking, "Have you heard of these 2 words? Yama ancestor?" Kai and Yinger's gaze grew a little heavier. What exactly is the Yama ancestor? When she had mentioned the bone sea of eternal darkness to Yun Chi, she had also mentioned Yan Zhu, Yama ancestor. But in the eastern divine region, it had been nothing more than a blurry name in a record. In fact, she had not even known whether it was a title or a name. The strangest thing about the words Yama ancestor was that they kept reappearing over time. This suggested that whatever it was had existed for a very long period of time. Chi Wuyao glanced away from them. Even she felt her heart stir when she thought of the existences that were the Yama ancestors. She replied in an unhurried manner, "Do you believe that immortals exist in this world?" Both Yun Chi and Kai and Yinger gave no reply, but the look in their eyes changed subtly. "The Yama ancestors are exactly that," Chi Wuyao said. "Furthermore, there are 3 of them." The already intrigued Yun Chi and Kai and Yinger were startled once again. Neither of them responded to Chi Wuyao's revelation, and they waited for her to continue speaking. "The words Yama ancestor mean exactly what they say. They are the founding ancestors of the Yama realm, so they've been living for at least 700 to 800,000 years. In fact, it's even possible that they've reached 1,000,000 years of age." Chi Wuyao began to slowly talk about the Yama ancestors, existences that only the 3 king realms had any comprehensive information about. The other star realms in the northern region had only heard this name in passing. In the ancient past, these 3 Yama ancestors obtained the devil blood and art left behind by the primordial Yama devils. After that, they conquered the bone sea of eternal darkness and created the Yama realm. Later on, after they had cultivated the Yama devil art to its peak, they suddenly realized that they could tether their life force to the darkness energy within the bone sea of eternal darkness using the Yama devil art. From then on, as long as the bone sea of eternal darkness remained, they would live forever. In fact, no matter how badly hurt they got, even if their bodies were completely broken, they could swiftly recover from those wounds within the bone sea of eternal darkness. They are not only immortal, they could also be said to be indestructible. They were devils who had survived for nearly 1,000,000 years, and they were even immortal and indestructible at that. Just hearing these incredibly outrageous words felt weird. Since they've already cultivated the Yama art to its pinnacle, and they can borrow the energy of the bone sea of eternal darkness to become immortal and indestructible, why are there only 3 Yama ancestors? But the answer had occurred to Kai and Yinger just as she had asked the question. "Is it an issue with bloodlines?" "That's right," Chi Wuyao nodded. "The only people who could obtain this treatment were the 3 old Yama ancestors who obtained the devil origin blood from the true devils. From then on, the descendants who inherited their Yama devil bloodline no longer possessed devil blood that was pure enough. Though they could still cultivate the Yama art, there was no one else who could become immortal and indestructible. What about the negative side effects? Xianxia suddenly asked. It was very clear that if there were no drawbacks or limitations to this ability of theirs, and they were truly immortal and indestructible, there would not be two other king realms in the northern divine region. Chi Wuyao turned her face toward Xianxia. When their eyes met, a seductive light flashed through her eyes, and it was so radiant and enchanting that it caused Xianxia's heart to stir. The lifespans of the three ancestors of the Yama realm withered away long ago. So right now, they are entirely reliant on the bone sea of eternal darkness for their immortality. As a result of that, they are unable to leave the bone sea of eternal darkness for more than an hour, because they will die if they exceed that time limit. Heh! Suddenly, Yinger, whose heart had been heavy and weighed down with many thoughts, spoke in a contemptuous manner. Then how are they any different from beasts who have been raised in a cage? Chi Wuyao's voice was still soft and cottony when she replied. Beasts trapped in a cage have no freedom, but they can guard the house. And since these three have lived for nearly 1,000,000 years in the best environment of darkness in the northern divine region, why don't you guess what realm their darkness profound energy has reached? Not a single one of them is inferior to the Yama Emperor. Chi Wuyao simply gave them the answer. Yinger. When it came to cultivation, the three Yama ancestors were three existences that equaled a god emperor of the northern region, even though they cannot leave the bone sea of eternal darkness for too long. If the Yama realm were to meet with any serious danger, these three dreadful Yama ancestors, who are at the very least equal to the Yama emperor in terms of strength, have enough power to rout any enemy and overturn any danger that threatens the Yama realm in that single hour. This is also why this queen has never dared to provoke the Yama realm, even though the Yama realm is equally afraid of this queen, because no one can overcome the Yama realm's home field advantage. Since this is the case, do you still think we should swallow up the Yama realm first? She directed this question toward Xianxia. A god emperor who was bound by some restrictions was still a god emperor. If the Yama emperor, someone who was already incredibly powerful himself, was added in, the Yama realm had 4 people at the level of a god emperor. Now that he knew about the 3 great Yama ancestors, he was probably going to hold back on that idea and reconsider where to attack first. Did the Yama realm ever come back to ask for me again during this period of time? Xianxia suddenly asked a question that sounded completely unrelated to the topic at hand. Chi Wuyao replied, No, he did not. The Yama emperor is someone who is quite good at keeping his cool. However, you still killed the Yama ghost king in the end, so there's no way that he's really going to just let it go. Perhaps he's just waiting for a suitable opportunity. HMPH, then we won't wait for them to come knocking on the door. Xianxia raised his head. We will still swallow up the Yama realm first. Not only did Xianxia not show any signs of hesitation when he found out about the Yama ancestors, his gaze even seemed more resolute than before. What about the amount of time? Will it be the same as before? Chi Wuyao asked as she stared at him unblinkingly. No. Xianxia spoke the next 5 words slowly. We will go right now. This time, Xianxia had even given Chi Wuyao a huge shock. Yinger stretched out a hand to grab Xianxia's arm. What exactly are you planning to do? Explain it to me clearly. If not, I won't allow you to go. If you do not explain yourself, this queen will not agree to this matter either, Chi Wuyao said with a look of consternation on her face. The gazes of the 2 women subconsciously collided for an instant. After that, they instantly averted their eyes. Xianxia did not say anything. He closed his eyes for a short period of time and released his soul power, forming 2 spirit fragments which entered Yinger and Chi Wuyao's brows respectively. Both women closed and opened their eyes simultaneously. Can you truly accomplish it? Yinger asked hesitantly. I can, Xianxia replied. No way. Yinger shook her head and her jade hand gripped Xianxia's arm a little tighter. It's far too dangerous. Danger? Xianxia asked in a cold and scoffing voice. What's that? Chi Wuyao lapsed into a brief moment of silence before saying, that really is too dangerous. This concerns the bone sea of eternal darkness and the Yama ancestors. There are too many things which cannot be calculated. However, since you are so eager for vengeance, it's not surprising that you'd choose to take a few risks rather than be tormented by the passage of time. I still disagree. Yinger took a step forward and glared at Xianxia. In a few more years, once our cultivation has become sufficiently strong, and you've successfully cultivated the eternal calamity of darkness, It won't be too difficult to swallow up the burning moon realm, and the Yama realm with the added power of the soul-stealing realm. There's simply no need for us to take such risks. You can't stop me, Chi replied without any hesitation or emotion. Kai and I Yinger bit back the words she wanted to say. Fine then, we'll do as you wish. Compared to Kai and I Yinger's vehement resistance to the idea, Chi Wuyao seemed to come around rather quickly. She gave it some thought before saying, however, there's no need for us to be too anxious when dealing with this matter. Before this, we should get rid of some causes for concern so we won't suffer any consequences when we enter the Yama realm. Causes for concern? The burning moon realm has been snooping around quite often the last few days. Chi Wuyao's eyes narrowed as she said those words, a cold and dangerous light flashing in her bewitching eyes. This is probably because they found out that this queen personally went to the border of the northern region 10 days ago. It is very likely that they've sniffed something out. It was not impossible for them to find out about the changes occurring within the soul-stealing realm. After all 3,600 soul attendants had undergone that dark rebirth. Once they were released from their quarantine, it would be easy to detect any strange changes, since there were so many people that they could spy on. If you're truly so anxious and impatient, Chi Wuyao paused for a moment before continuing, this queen will personally pay a visit to the burning moon god realm tomorrow. To do what exactly? Kai and I Yinger asked. To put on a show of force, Chi Wuyao said with a dry chuckle. And while I'm at it, I'll also be calling in an old debt. Kai and I Yinger turned to the side. It was as if she was not willing to let Chi or Chi Wuyao see the look in her eyes right now. Since we've already decided to go to the Yama realm, aren't you afraid that going to the burning moon realm to put on a show of force will be counterproductive instead? Chi Wuyao chuckled before she replied. If it was the Yama emperor, then it would indeed be counterproductive to do such a thing. But when it comes to the burning moon god emperor, this queen understands him all too well. 10,000 years ago, he took advantage of the chaos resulting from the clear sky god emperor's death to steal the untamed divine marrow. But after he witnessed this queen's abilities, he decided to hide it far away from the burning moon realm, and he did not even dare to touch it for the next 10 millennia. Her lips curved into a small, mocking smile. He is someone who values his position above all else, someone who hates taking even the smallest risk. I'll go with you, Chi said. Sure, Chi Wuyao readily accepted his condition. The burning moon realm was to the west of the Yama realm, and it was about as far from the Yama realm as the Yama realm was from the soul-stealing realm. Fen Daejun, a mighty name that had once shaken the northern divine region. However, that name had long since been forgotten by the world, but there was no one in the northern region who did not recognize his other name. The burning moon god emperor. Today, something startled him so badly that his eyes suddenly shot open while he was meditating. After that, he slowly rose to his feet. God Emperor, what instructions do you have for us? The servant girl at the burning moon god emperor's side said as she hurried over. When she saw the grave expression on his face, she was so shocked that her heart tensed up and she did not dare to say anything further. The burning moon god emperor raised his head to look at the sky. His eyebrows tightly knit together and his jade robes were trembling. Suddenly, the atmosphere through the entire great hall had become oppressive. There was no way he could mistake this aura. It was Devil Queen Chi Wuyao. She clearly did not have any intention of hiding her aura. On the contrary, she was deliberately releasing her aura, and even though she was still a great distance away from the burning moon realm, he could already feel it with unmistakable clarity. If one were to compare the total strength of each of the 3 king realms of the northern region, the Yama realm would be the strongest. However, if you were to ask the burning moon god emperor who he feared the most, his answer would be the soul-stealing realm's emperor, Chi Wuyao. And today she had suddenly come to visit him personally without any warning at all. He turned his head to the side. His brows sank and he suddenly spoke in a deep voice. Open the realm and prepare a feast.